Hey everybody, thanks for joining us today. I got my man Ican with me. We're going to fix what we messed up on yesterday. I deleted that video. Um, and we're going to get into Orthodox Metaphysics episode 1 of a series. And I'm not a big metaphysics guy. Everybody knows I'm more into history. I'm like the humanities side of patristics, history, poetry, etc. My main man, Ican, the Copt, he's got Greek down better than the Greeks do. So we're gonna get in on this. Please like, comment, subscribe. Any questions? Go in the live chat. Go for it. We have the PowerPoint ready from yesterday, and we're gonna go ahead and start. Thank you, Ican. I appreciate you being here with me.
Of course, man. All right. So I guess we're gonna try again with what happened yesterday. Just gonna go over the presentation and see if we can do better this time. All right. So this presentation is gonna be about metaphysics and Christology. So how the two topics intercorrelate. Metaphysics is obviously more correlated with philosophy, and Christology is more correlated with theology, but there are a lot of interconnections, things correlated between them, and we will examine how the fathers viewed these categories of metaphysics and how they applied them, and how the non-Orthodox viewed them. So first off, I'll start by some definitions. And by the way, Daniel, if you'd like to interrupt at any time, just go ahead. Feel free and let me know if anyone in the chat has any questions as well.
We'll do.
All right. So the for the first for an introduction, I used a quote from Leontius of Jerusalem. He's actually a Chalcedonian, so he's considered by our church as a heretic. But I think this quote sums it up very nicely of the different types of oneness, and I'll show that we do not agree with their views on what this oneness is, and they don't agree with our view. So he says that there are different types of ways that something can be one. It can be one in name, and this is what the Nestorians call one in prosopon, one in person. They don't mean person as in hypostasis. They don't mean person as an individual. They mean person as in a common name, a set of qualities, and other stuff like that. And we'll go more into that later. The other way is in genus or in form, and these are kind of synonyms in a way. When you're at the most basic level, they're kind of synonyms because both of them are um, just generalities. They're just common ideas. So I'll go more into that later. And then the last way is one in number, one in individual. This is the way that us Orthodox say that there is one nature and one hypostasis of Christ. We mean one in number, one individual. And he says, apart from these, it's impossible to say that anything is one. Now, you'll notice that throughout this presentation, I'm going to be quoting a lot of Chalcedonians, and that's because the main thing I'm trying to establish is that both of us agree on the same kind of background or metaphysics, but we disagree on the conclusions. So we have a very similar metaphysical background, but the things that we come up with from it is very different. And the same for the Nestorians. So first thing I will talk about is the general slash common versus the particular slash the individual. So the common or general is something that's shared by many. It's common because it doesn't belong to one alone, it belongs to many. It's abstract, which means it exists only in the mind, so you can only contemplate it in the mind. And it's a common definition of a group of individuals. That means, for example, humanity. For example, me and Daniel, we have the same humanity, which is common to both of us, shared by both of us. And so this humanity is our essence, as well as animality. Animality means to be an animal. This is shared by both humans and by um, um, any animal, for example, a monkey or a goat or anything else. There's also rationality. This also belongs to humans alone, but also to angels. So angels and humans are kind of co-essential according to rationality, which is a genus. And I'll elaborate more on this later. Now, that's what's common. That's what's shared by many. Next, there's the individual or the particular. It's specific. It's not common. It only belongs to one, and that's why we say one in number, because it belongs to one alone. It's concrete and it's individual. For example, I can. Uh, that's a particular. Daniel Kakish is a particular. A specific dog, maybe named Pumpkin or something. That's an individual, etc. All these are individuals. A good example I like to give for a way to think about it is the difference between a common noun versus a proper noun. A common noun would be a dog. A proper noun would be a golden shepherd. A common noun would be a boy. A proper noun would be Dioscorus. Common noun would be a bird. Proper noun would be a pigeon. So as you can see, the common it's shared by many, but the proper is more specific. It's different from many. And so at the bottom, I have a quote attached from a person called Maximus, the so-called confessor. He is once again a Chalcedonian father, and so I'll be showing that he also agrees on this point while still rejecting the conclusions. He says, and if these same people say that Christ is a composite nature, which is what us Orthodox do, behold the wondrous apex of Severus's reasonings. Saint Severus of he's talking about Saint Severus of Antioch, canonized in the Oriental Orthodox Church. He says this nature, the composite nature, must either be generic or singular. It must be common, shared, general, or it has to be singular, individual, particular. And he says that between these, of course, we know there's no intermediary. So there's nothing between a general and a particular. It's either that or this. You can't have one or the other. And so, oops, I ignored this slide. Okay, this is a slide that I wanted to look at. So what does it mean? What does it mean to be one in genus or species? Genus and species are general. They're common. Examples of a genus is living, rational, animal, animate, etc. So this is very generic. For example, living is shared by almost everything. Birds, animals, man, angels, demons, all of it. They're all living. So this genus is common to all of them. Rational belongs only to man and angels. Only man and angels are rational beings, which means they think in a proper way, think in a more rational way. And then there's animal. This belongs to man as well as other animals like monkeys or goats or horses or etc. And then there's also animate, which means moving. For example, or can be moved by, for example, soul. This is this belongs to man, animals, but does not belong, for example, to plants. Plants can't move on of their own will. And so genus is then divided into species. So genus is more common, more general than a species is. A species is just think of the word that you learned in science so many years ago. Man, birds, fish, angels, all those kinds of groups. Now, this oneness in genus or species, which is common, this is what we usually mean when we call a collection of individuals one essence or one nature. For example, we call humanity one essence or we call it one nature. And so when we say that, we mean genus or species. We mean what's common between them. And so at the bottom, I have it. It says genus is divided into species, and then species is divided into individuals. So man, a species, is divided into many men. For example, there's man as common, and then there's individual men as I can, as Daniel, as Dioscorus, as Dionysius, and etc. The next is we have oneness in number or individual. This is a category, one of the two categories that we're going to focus on. Oneness in number or individual. This is what us Oriental Orthodox accept. This is what we teach, and it's called by Saint Cyril and other fathers a substantial union, a genuine union. So when two things become one in number or one in individual, that means they've been substantially or genuinely united, becoming one out of two. And this is the view of the Oriental Orthodox when we say one hypostasis out of two or one nature out of two. So it is a particular or individual. And only this definition can ensure that Christ is one subject, one actor, one subject, one person who does all the actions. Next, we have the alternative, which is being one in name or one in homonym. This is called by many the accidental union because it's a union in accidents, which I will elaborate on further. So, a homonym is defined by Aristotle as when things have only a name in common and the account of the essence, which corresponds to the name, is different. They are called homonymous. Homonymous. I don't know. So basically, when things are distinct in essence and the only thing they share is having a name or similar categories, uh, they're called homonym. They only have their unity in a homonym, a name. And so this is characterized by believing in a sharing of names, worship, or properties, such as the Nestorians and, as I will argue, the Chalcedonians did. All right. And so names, a union in names is, for example, Christ being a common name to the two natures, as Nestorius declared, and he was condemned for this idea by Saint Theodotus of Ancyra and Saint Cyril in the Council of Ephesus. They also say that the two natures are worshipped together as opposed to having one worship to one individual. They say that the two natures have their worship together. Also, oneness and properties. The two natures share certain individual properties such as sonship, agreement in will, power, etc. And this is what the Nestorians taught that the two natures have one sonship, one will, one power, which by that they just meant that they agree in will or agree in power or are counted as one son, even though they're truly not for them. And so this union is called one prosopon, one person, as opposed to the Orthodox union where we call Christ one nature or one hypostasis of the incarnate word. And so at the bottom, I have a quote from Dr. Sergei Trostiensky from his book, St. Cyril of Alexandria's Metaphysics of the Incarnation. Here he kind of gives a pretty good definition of what a homonym is for the Nestorians. He talks at the beginning about how the people who founded this theory started with Theodore of Tarsus, who was a teacher of Theodore of Mopsuestia, and Theodore of Mopsuestia was the teacher of Nestorius. So the three of them were together basically the founders of Nestorianism. And so continued across later centuries, even to this day, with among many Protestants, and I would argue the Chalcedonians, the Chalcedonian churches such as the Roman Catholics and the Eastern Orthodox, but mainly the Eastern Orthodox in regards to the Greeks, their Greek beliefs. So um, they believe in what's called a homonymous appellation, one name, one Christ, in the sense of it being a common name for two subjects, God and man. So they have God and they have a separate man, and the two together have just one name. They're only united by some external manifestation. So to us, they only look as one, but in reality, they're two. And so this type of unity is just external. It's not a unity of whole from parts. It's just a union, such as adding two things together but keeping them two, and then calling them one and by name alone. So, in other words, Christ is not a proper name of the subject. It's not a name belonging to one subject alone, but rather it's a common name shared among the subjects. And so it's shared by God and man on account of the external relation. Now, I'm going to elaborate on property or accident. The difference between essences as well as hypostases and property slash accident is the difference between the characteristics or indicators and the object characterized or indicated. For example, characteristics, which are properties, this can include height, color, shape, etc. But the essence or hypostasis, this is characterized. That's what's being characterized by the properties indicated by them. So this is the object that possesses the height, that possesses color, that possesses shape, and so on. And so accident is practically speaking, a synonym for property. Uh, but it clarifies that the property is contingent or able to change. So that's the difference between accident and property. Property is not always contingent or able to change, such as properties of God, but accidents are. Hence, creation possesses accidents, but God does not. And here at the bottom, I have a quote from Saint Cyril of Alexandria in his Thesaurus, where he says, "If uncreatedness and unsubjectness, and etc., alike indicate substance, and the indicated are not the same as indicators, then substance and uncreatedness will not be the same thing, just as also the indicator is not the same thing as the indicator." So what he's saying is properties such as uncreated and unsubjectness and all similar properties, they indicate the essence of God, but they are not the essence of God. They're different from it. So there's a difference between property and the object of the property. Difference between characterizer and characteristic. I mean characterized. And continuing on this, I'm gonna clarify the difference between the essential properties and hypostatic slash individual properties. So essential properties are properties which are shared by individuals, so who share the same essence. So this is, for example, all humans have the essential property to be able to walk, to be able to eat, to be able to sleep, to have two arms, to have two legs, etc. This is common to all humans. It's one in all humans. However, hypostatic or individual properties are the properties which belong to only one individual and distinguish them from others. For example, someone being a certain height, for example, 6 foot two, or someone being dark skinned or light skinned, or someone having a certain shape or size or fat or etc. So all these properties are individual properties. They distinguish him from someone else. And this can even include the property of sitting down, or the property of standing up, or the property of having long hair, the property of being from Nazareth, or being from Egypt, or etc. But sometimes, such as what the Nestorians believe, um, these properties can be shared by groups of individuals, such as when a group has one will through agreement. They only agree, and so they're said to have one will. Or when they have one operation by cooperating together. So they're said to have one operation in the sense that they're just working together. They're just doing the same thing while remaining multiple individuals. And so at the bottom here, I have a quote from Saint Severus of Antioch. It's a very helpful quote to understand this. The Father has only one hypostatic or individual property, and that's fatherhood or being unbegotten. The Son has only one hypostatic property, which is sonship or being begotten by the Father. The Holy Spirit has only one property, again, hypostatic, which is being begotten. I mean, not being begotten, but proceeding from the Father. There's a difference between being begotten and proceeding. And so the Holy Spirit's special property is proceeding from the Father. And so these three properties alone is what distinguishes the persons of the Trinity. But all the other properties, as I have said, as common, equal in honor, and undivided. So all the other properties, such as being uncreated, being divine, being creator, being omnipresent, omnipotent, omniscient. All these properties are common to the three members of the Trinity. And so that's why we believe in one God, because even the divinity is one in the Trinity. Now I'm going to move on to the Orthodox Patristic view of the Incarnation and its metaphysics. So the church fathers, they accepted that there's a union of individual or number, which means to be one individual and one in number. And this they called the one hypostasis or one nature of Christ. I have a quote here from Saint Cyril where he talks about how the same individual is at the same time God and man, then he has to be worshipped as one individual with a single act of worship. Uh, and again, I have a quote from Saint Gregory of Nyssa, which he wrote in a letter to Pope Saint Theophilus of Alexandria. He says, "What justification remains for those who seek to divide the one into two separate elements?" So, what justification is there for the person who divides Christ, divides him who is one, into two separate things, two separate natures, or etc. And he says, how could the unity be separated into a duality? So how could the unity be made into two, dual, since no numerical distinction can be made? So it means they are the same in number, or one in individual.
Very deadly cold.
What?
Very deadly cold.
Yeah, it is. All right, now we have the patristic rejection of a union of homonym. Now I'm gonna clarify real quick. I have 3 slides for this, for the 3 different types of homonym, union of homonym, which is a union of names, union of worship, and union of properties and accidents. So we reject all these, and we must accept a natural union or hypostatic union, which is union in individual and number. So first off, we have the union of homonym in names, which means just having a common name. And against Theodore and Theodore, Saint Cyril of Alexandria wrote that if the union was made by names alone and by the mere collection of names, then this avoids the mystery of the truth. So if they, as Theodore and Theodore taught, if the union is just merely in names only, or a mere collection of names being shared by two individuals, then this is not the truth. This is not the Orthodox teaching. Then I have another quote from Saint Theodotus of Ancyra. Saint Theodotus of Ancyra, by the way, he's a very important father. He attended the Third Ecumenical Council. He's a father of the Third Ecumenical Council, uh, the Council of Ephesus in 431 AD. And he wrote a work called the Exposition on the Nicene Creed. This exposition on the Nicene Creed, he wrote it to show that the Nicene Creed teaches orthodoxy, teaches Miaphysitism. It does not teach the Nestorian teachings. And so here he says, but if you say that the name of the Son is one, and you place the name Christ as one, but you say that different essences are signified by this name, you do not agree with the fathers. So if you say that only the name is one, only the name Son is one, or the name Christ is one, or the name person is one, or the name hypostasis is one, but you say that distinct essences or distinct natures are signified by this name, then you don't agree with the fathers. It doesn't matter if these essences are common or general, or if they're particular/individual. If you're still saying that Christ is two, then of course they will necessarily be individual. And even if not, you can't say that the name Christ indicates two of these, because then you wouldn't be agreeing with the Father. Because the name Christ and the name Son has only one significance, which is the one hypostasis or one nature of Christ. And so he says, if their concern was only about the name and they said there's only one Son, have your sophistry explain how the name is one thing, but the things signified are many. So he's asking them, how is there one name, but many things signified by this one name? So how is there one in name, but two in number? It's not possible, according to him. Because for every name, there has to be one referent, one thing being referred to. And so if there's one thing being referred to, there's one name, one referent. An example I like to bring is if you have two cubes and you call the cubes a box. Sure, now they have one name of box, but you still have two boxes. And so if you say that there are two natures or two hypostases or two persons, and say that they have the common name of one Son or the common name of one Christ, you'll still necessarily be teaching two Christs and two Sons for each one of these natures or hypostases or persons or whatever they want to call it. And so he continues by asking them, why complicate the designation, leaving the referent behind? So why are they overcomplicating things? Why are they saying that there's two referents, two things being signified, but one signification or designation? And he says, but if they as in the Nicene Council, the Council of Nicaea, which made our creed, if they used a single name for the only begotten Son, why inflate it? Why make it compound by adding additional significances? Why add new things in there? There's one Son, which means there's one hypostasis or one nature of Christ. Now I'll move on to the patristic rejection of the union of homonym in worship. So sharing the same name and worship and properties and all that. So here, Saint Cyril of Alexandria in his second tome against Nestorius, he says, he's quoting Nestorius. Nestorius said that he divides the natures, but he unites the worship. So Saint Cyril tells him, if you keep divided the natures, then the properties of each of them will naturally go along with them, and then everything will be different in Christ, and so you'll have to confess two worships. And then he says, but tell me, what is it that severs the natures one from the other, and what will be the mode of their difference? I'll skip ahead. He asked him, how then do you say that it's right to honor one worship things of so unlike nature and parted? So how do you worship two natures and two hypostases and two persons with one worship? Because that wouldn't make sense. If one of them is God and the other is man, then you're bringing down God to man's glory, or you're bringing the man up to God's glory, and so you're worshiping a man, a mere man. And so he gives the analogy of comparing a horse and a man. If you give them the same honor, if you give a horse and a man the same honor, then how are you not lowering the man to the value of a horse? Or how are you not raising a horse to the value of a man? It's not consistent. You would be dragging the better nature down to dishonor and insulting the superior nature, or you'd be insulting God and worshiping a man. That's the issue with worshiping two natures instead of worshiping one incarnate nature of Christ.
We got
And then lastly,
Dioscorus with us too on the phone, by the way.
huh?
I said we have Dioscorus with us on the phone.
Okay, perfect.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And so next we have the patristic rejection of a union of homonym, which means properties or accidents. And as I clarified earlier, properties or accidents means the things that characterize an individual. And in this case, we're talking about the individual properties or accidents. So here we have Saint Cyril condemning Nestorius for teaching an accidental union, a union of accidents, which means that they share only individual properties and are not truly one. And then in the second quote, it's again Saint Cyril. This time he's defending his 12 anathemas against the bishops of Oriens. And he says, but if something is held in common, it cannot be common to one, but always to two or more things understood to be individual and separate. So let's say two things you say share the same stuff. It was those two things still have to be individual and separate. They have to be separated from each other and individual, because you can't share something with yourself. That doesn't make sense. That doesn't exist. If you're sharing it with yourself, you already have it, so you wouldn't be sharing it with yourself. But if you're sharing it with something else, if it's common to something else along with you, then you have to be multiple and you'll be individual and separate. So if, for example, the two natures share the same worship and names and properties and etc., then even if they have all this stuff in common, they're still going to be separate, because now they're sharing it. Now they're separated by and the individual and on their own. Does anyone want to add anything at this point?
Yeah, go for it.
I want to add something. First, apologies for being late. Second, Theodotus of Ankara in his exposition on the Nicene Creed said something very similar to what was actually just stated by Ican from Saint Cyril about Alexandria. So he says, but in section 10, but wishing to cloud the simplicity of our faith with urgent words and being hindered by Christ, who is called by the common name of Son of Christ, he opens this door of blasphemy against Christ. And concerning our Savior, he speaks two declarative things, each one having, oh, sorry, this is the wrong section. Well, he said it somewhere. It's later on. It's past section 10. It's like 24 sections long, the whole thing. I think it's around 20. Say it somewhere. I'll find it.
If we can, this is reminding me of the Twitter. Sorry, it looked like Dionysius wants to talk. You can't. It's not letting you unmute yourself. Can you talk, Dionysius? Go ahead.
I am not being permitted to speak.
Go ahead. Go talk. Can you talk? Go for it.
I'm not being permitted to speak.
By who? Okay, I don't know what happened to him. Can you talk, bro?
Dude, he said he's not being permitted to speak. It's Flavian all over.
I know. All right. So what I was trying to say, was recent, like these days, the last 3 days or so, the whole Marmari Emmanuel thing, the rogue Assyrian. He's it's been kind of going all over Twitter the last 3 days. So first, a video comes out of him chanting, traditional Church of the East prayers that venerate Nestorius, which shouldn't surprise anybody. And then there's another video of him explaining why he doesn't like to call Mary the Mother of God, believing Christokos is a more complete title. And then there's another video of him that is recent to defend the one of him chanting. Okay, to defend the one of him chanting about the Nestorius thing and saying, fine, like I accept Mother of God, no problem. And he's like winking and making jokes about it. Like, sure, Mother of God, it's not a big deal. Like we could say that just Mother of Christ is more complete and whatever. And Mother of God, I don't have a problem with. It's the same exact thing that the Antiochians did. Theodoret, John of Antioch, Dominus, Ibas, these guys. It's the same thing all over again that Marmari's doing, where he's like, yeah, Mother of God, sure. God dwelt in the man, he said. So that automatically,
it's not just Dominus and all of that. It carries on to it carries past, the Second Constantinople Chalcedonians to the Third Constantinople Chalcedonians who they worship two natures.
Sure, Maximus.
Because I worship the human nature because it was deified.
Yeah,
I
mean, I don't really see it. I don't see a real difference between Maximus and Theodore of Mopsuestia.
Yeah.
So, but what I'm saying is, what Ican is talking about here, it's like, because Marmari in the most recent video, he's saying, yeah, she's the mother of the Word incarnate. She's the mother of the second person of the Trinity incarnate. And then he dwelt in a man. So really, it's exactly what you're saying. It's like they're sharing this name, but there's like two still functioning. It's like the thing about Nestorius where he says, like they're not the Magi didn't worship the baby, they worshiped the Word who dwelt in the baby.
Yeah, the poem of Leo is the same thing.
Right, Leo.
He also said God cannot be a 3-year-old baby.
I'm trying to think of it off the top of my head, but it says that something like he who so he who is like us is like a babe or whatever in some manger, whatever.
Yeah.
But he who the Magi seeks to worship is the Lord of all. And so he who he who And he's doing this in the context of contrasting natures. So he says in that same context, he's just going between this nature does that, the other nature does that, this nature does that, the other nature does that. There's no way to refute the Syrian Church of the East if you hold to a diaphysite Christology, because first off, you fall under the condemnation of the Council of Ephesus and the Holy Fathers of the Council of Ephesus. So it's like, what are you doing?
Yeah, but what I'm saying is Marmari's acceptance of the Mother of God title is the same as the Antiochians accepting the formula of 433. Think about this. Chalcedonians, especially you guys, if you're watching, think about this. So, Marmari, just like the Antiochians, just like Chalcedon, accepted saying, okay, Mother of God, no problem, Mother of God. But we have nothing now to do. There's been no discussion of how the union occurs. It's just a title. So this is exactly what ICANN is saying on the screen, is that they're sharing in a title, but that doesn't make the union real. So just to say Mother of God is not enough. Cyril has 12 anathemas, not just the first one. The first one, Theotokos. What about the other 11? They didn't accept them. Ibas says in his letter, he recanted, Cyril, recanted of the thing. And this was read openly at Chalcedon in the minutes, and nobody condemns the letter? Are you guys deaf?
It's accepted as Orthodox.
Accepted as Orthodox. Okay, so there's that, and it's happening today. So Marmari saying it today for us isn't like we went back in a time machine. The Chalcedonians got duped on it. Half of them did. Half of them caught what was going on. Half of them said, "Oh, he's saying Mother of God. What's the problem?" Half of them said, "Yeah, but he's saying God dwelt in a man." Good catch. But this is why in Chalcedonianism, it's so easy for Nestorianism to hide in it, because Chalcedonianism leads to that anyways. So
the only difference is
no room for this. We catch it right away. We're aware, especially the Syriac Orthodox. We know what these guys are saying. We speak the same language.
the only difference is they don't differentiate between, instead of calling the natures hypostases, they call them natures. But each one has its own will. This one wills. This one's scared of the garden. This one does this. This one does that. But it's still a union by name only.
So exactly, I think, and I honestly, for that, I think the Church of the East is even more consistent than the Eastern Chalcedonians. At least they're honest about it. Can you explain the different essence thing that you're telling me?
Oh, okay. So you asked earlier, why did I say that man is consubstantial with angels? I want to clarify. It depends on your usage of essence, because essence is used as species, but also as genus. And genus is more general than species. So think when you hear species, think of like fifth grade science. You know, you heard all these species: man, bird, animal, fish. All these are different species.
Yeah.
But even they have stuff in common, right? For
Yeah.
example, man and animals are also both animals. Like the irrational animals and man are both types of animals. And so what is this commonality called? That's a genus. But what's different between the
the distinction between essence and genus is only partial. Like they're overlapping, because sometimes there's genus within a genus, and then
yeah. Genus has like a bunch of like other stuff. But what's the difference between mankind and animals or irrational animals? It's rationality. Man is rational. We can think like rational beings. But we have this rationality in common with angels.
So in Marmari's video, thank you, brother. I can.
No problem.
In Marmari's video where he's trying to fix what he said, he goes, "Fine, Mary's the mother of God. Happy Catholics, happy Orthodox," and then he winks. No, we're not happy, Marmari, because what you're saying is still heresy. You don't believe in one composite nature of the word. You're saying there are two natures after the union. Who else says that? The Chalcedonians. So Chalcedonians, you're mad at Marmari for saying what? For saying there are two natures after the union? What are you mad at him for? You say the same thing. What I want to understand, if you guys can explain to me, please. What's the Chalcedonian problem with what Marmari is saying? If Marmari is saying Mother of God, which he did, why are the Chalcedonians still mad at him?
So
He might be jealous that he knows what the natures are after the union.
So the thing is about the Chalcedonians and the Nestorians, I want to, I guess, take an example out of both groups. For the Chalcedonians, I'm going to talk about John of Damascus, and for the Nestorians, I'm going to talk about Theodore of Mopsuestia.
Okay.
Now, for us Orthodox, we know why she's the mother of God, because she
Yes.
gave birth to God in the flesh, God who
Yes.
became man for our salvation.
Yes.
It's that simple for us. One reason. He is God who became man. One reason only. For Theodore, and his, I believe, on his book on the Incarnation, Theodore of Mopsuestia, the father of Nestorianism, venerated by the Assyrians, not venerated, condemned actually by us and by even the Chalcedonians. This Theodore, he says that Mary is called the mother of God for two reasons. The first reason is because the flesh that was born from her, the man who was born from her, is called God. Why? Because he's deified, they say. Deified doesn't made God; he was made into God. In the same way that in the same way that Theosis is like, he became God, in the sense of sharing the same name as God and sharing the same honor and etc. So they believe that the man was deified, and so that's one reason that Mary is the mother of God. She's the mother of God because she gave birth to a man who was called God. Now they have another reason why she's called God. They say that she's called God because mother of God. I mean, they say she's the mother of God because God, the Word, who has connection with the man, was in a sense born from her. In the sense that he was connected to the man, he indwelled the man, and so he wasn't truly born of her, but just in a mere sense that he was indwelling the man who was born of her. So the Nestorians have two reasons. She gave birth to God because she gave birth to a deified man, and she gave birth to God because she gave birth to God who indwelled the man. Now, as for the Chalcedonians, John of Damascus, in his book on the Orthodox faith, I believe it's book 3 or book 5, one of those two, probably book 3, he talks about why Saint Mary is called the Mother of God. Oops. Yeah, why Saint Mary is called the Mother of God. He says that she is called such because for two reasons. Once again, you see that both the Nestorians and the Chalcedonians have two reasons. For John of Damascus, the first reason is because the flesh that was born from her is deified. So that's the first reason, deified flesh. The second reason is because she also gave birth to the Word of God. Now, he doesn't clarify what this means, but we can pretty much assume that it's the same as Theodore. Because why would you have two reasons for that? And so, if she is the mother of the flesh in a distinct way from being the mother of God, then necessarily you'll have her being the mother of two sons, mother of two gods. Since each one is on its own, each one is distinct. You have the deified flesh who is just made God in a special way, and then the Word of God who is connected to the deified flesh. It's insanity. And so you can see that even at that point in time for the Chalcedonians, this is the 9th century, they were still upholding the Christological views of Theodore of Mopsuestia and Theodore of Tarsus, even though they condemned them in name alone.
It seems that they both sort of have an adoptionist view on how Jesus' flesh becomes God.
In a way, yeah.
Yeah, I have a question real quick. So, did you include that quotation from St. Theodotus, Exposition, section 20? Because if not, then I'd like to kind of just read the section that I want people to have right now.
Dioscorus, are you looking at my presentation? Is this it? Because I have it up right now.
I'm not looking at it.
Okay, so the quote I included is the one about how the Nestorians say that different essences are signified by the name of Christ and Son.
No, that's sections 9 to 10. Read this one real quick.
Okay, go ahead.
It's referring to how Nestorius is like a heretic, right? And he says, but in order to make what is said clear, I will present to them the words of the deceived themselves in that epistle, in which he speaks in these words. The apostle says, I am about to bring the passion, placing Christ first, the common name of the two natures, as I said a little earlier, to the word, suitable to both natures. For what does he say? Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus, who who being in the form of God did not consider it robbery to be equal with God. And being silent about the rest, he regarded them as hostile to him. He brings it up, saying, "But to avoid repeating everything, I became obedient, even unto death on a cross." And there was not much said between him and the apostle. And then he continues a little later. He's talking a little bit. And then he says, "For just as above, he has permission to believe in one Lord, following the exposition of the fathers. But Christ has given himself the common name of many natures," or of several natures, really is better, I think. Several natures. So here he empties himself of the word, removing it sufficiently to teach that God descended into communion with human affairs. So basically, he's attacking this whole idea that Nestorius is saying Christ is the common name of many natures, and this is something that John of Damascus says, just to back off of his point, that John, he has the same mereology as the classical Nestorians. He has really the same rationale for why he does everything, like for one worship, but the subject of your worship is two natures, just like Theodore, Theodoret, probably, or definitely Nestorius, but probably also Theodore explicitly speaks about this. But yeah, so I just wanted to add that quote.
Yeah. So, anyways, I brought up the Marmari thing was just because I was giving an example of where, like, the name is there, but there isn't a real union of what we're talking about. So it's something that it's enough. It's not enough to say Mother of God.
And from a historical perspective, when it was asked, I think by Yusuf Deacon Daniel, according to the Chalcedonians, what is wrong with what this individual is saying, this Syrian
according to who?
individual? According to the Chalcedonians, what's wrong with his confession?
I couldn't figure it out. I don't know.
Well, here's what it is.
What?
Is that he simply doesn't have the name of rejecting Nestorius, and so for them not being a Nestorian is just the name.
So
just look at
what
Bastamaris. The letter of Bastamaris condemns Nestorius, but he won't condemn Nestorius, and for them that's really his only central problem.
Exactly.
Because they would have
yeah.
they are even fine with him saying two hypostases, because Anastasius of Sinai speaks of there being two hypostases, and some like Cyrillian sense, and Chalcedonians, when they study Saint Cyril, when he said the natures that is the hypostases, they have to say in that context, Saint Cyril would also then believe there's two hypostases after the union in that sense of the word hypostasis as he uses it contextually.
Unbelievable. So look at this. So
I think their cope is for natures that is hypostases is that hypostasis in its original sense just means substance. But then it gets into the question, what are the two substances after the union? So it's a union of juxtaposition, no matter how they look at it.
So what I'm trying to say in the Council of Chalcedon in the minutes, Theodoret, when he was asked to anathematize Nestorius and the formula of reunion, they were asked to anathematize Nestorius and accept Mother of God, right? And in Chalcedon, he was asked for Theodoret to do the same thing. So Theodore, what he said was, my teacher was Orthodox. Who's his teacher?
It's Theodore of Moscow. He said that with him too. He says it's me, and he also says it's my teacher. And he also says that I've already anathematized Nestorius a bunch of times. Do you really need to do it again?
Right.
And so when he does it again, it's not like he's changing anything. And by the way, the letter of Ibastamaris, this letter also condemns Nestorius as an adoptionist, and yet we can all agree that it's Nestorian in content.
So I'm trying to get to something here. Look, pay attention, guys. So look, at Chalcedon, he's saying my teacher was Orthodox. His teacher was Theodore of Mopsuestia. he says, I condemn Nestorius and Eutyches and whoever else says there aren't two natures, one person in two natures. It's a very easy thing to do. It's not repentance. He's saying he was Orthodox and he's always been Orthodox, and his teacher Theodore is Orthodox. You know what Marmari said today, or in the video? He said they misunderstood a certain saint. Who do you think Marmari's talking about? Nestorius. He's talking about Nestorius. So if he's talking about Nestorius or Theodore or one of their saints, he's not mentioning him by name. Theodoret did the same thing. He said, my teacher was Orthodox. Who's his teacher? He didn't say his name. You fools, Chalcedonian fools, open your eyes. Look what you guys did in your robber synod. This is not led by the Holy Spirit. Open your eyes.
And our Second Council of Ephesus is led by the Holy Spirit.
Absolutely. Okay, let's go. I can. Go ahead. Sorry for that. Go for it.
No problem at all. I appreciate the stuff you guys added. It was really helpful to present what my next point will be, which is now we're going to move on to how the Nestorians and the Chalcedonians have basically the same views on all this stuff. By the way, Daniel M. in the comments, he asked, doesn't Theodoret believe that the fetus had to be formed for some time before receiving a human soul? No, that was Babai, the so-called great. He is a saint in the Assyrian Church of the East. All right. So now we'll be going on to the Nestorian view of the union. They reject the union of individual/number. For this point, I mainly gathered quotes from Saint Cyril, since us and the Chalcedonians already agree that Saint Cyril was right about them. And so here, the first quote, he critiques the Theodore of Tarsus. Theodore was teaching a diversity of worship for Christ. And so Saint Cyril is arguing, if there's a diversity in the worship, if you worship the two natures in two different ways, then it will necessarily not be the same worship from us. It won't be one worship. And so he says, where there's a difference in worship and honor, then there will also be an inequality of power. An inequality and difference in power in regard to less or greater comes to two hypostases and persons. So his argument is, if you have two worships, then the person being worshipped will have two powers, and if there are two powers, then necessarily there's going to be two hypostases and persons. This is actually a very good quote against the Chalcedonians as well, because they actually do teach that there are two powers of Christ. They teach two powers, two wills, two activities. And so according to Saint Cyril, if there's a diversity of power or diversity of operation or whatever, like a duality of it, then there will necessarily also be a duality of hypostases and persons. And not only that, technically, it would also lead to two worships. Because if duality of worship indicates a duality of power, then vice versa, duality of power will lead to a duality of worship. So if, as the Chalcedonians teach, Christ has two powers, then technically they should give him two worships, not one worship. And also they should acknowledge him as two hypostases and persons. And so this is what Saint Cyril critiqued Theodore of Tarsus for teaching. And then in the second quote, he he says that Nestorius attributes things to a man, individual, and alone, considered apart from the word. So again, they do not teach a union of individual or number. So what type of union do they teach? It's a union of homonym, the accidental union that we talked about earlier. So here we have the first section, which is names. We have a quote from Theodore of Mopsuestia, where he says that the name Christ is common to both God and the man. It signifies God the Word because of the union with him, and it signifies the man because the man was the one anointed, perfected by oil. And so God the Word, Christ indicates both natures, which are in one person. As you see here, that a lot of Chalcedonians are confused, and they think that the Nestorians explicitly said two persons. No, they said one person, but they do not teach a natural union or a substantial union. And so this one person means nothing. It means one name, it means one property, it means one whatever, but it's not truly one, not one subject, not one individual. And so for the second point, I decided to just quote the very famous quote of Nestorius. I didn't even have to cite it from how well known it is. He says, I divide the natures, but I unite the worship. Very simple. And we will see when we move on to the Chalcedonian section that the Chalcedonians actually agree with Nestorius on this, or at least right after the Council of Chalcedon they did. So the third point is the union of homonym according to properties or accidents. So at the bottom we have a quote from Theodoret of Cyrus where he says, the subsistent entity, person, and property are all the same thing, which means individual property. So he's saying that the person is a property, which is why he teaches one person, as he says, because he actually just means a union of properties. So two natures sharing the same individual property. Now, at the top we have Theodore of Mopsuestia in his book against Eunomius. He says that person, prosopon, person, is used in a twofold way. It's used in two ways. It can either signify the hypostases, which is the individual, or it can be unity and properties such as honor, greatness, worship, and etc. For example, he says, Paul and Peter signify the hypostasis and person of each one of them. But the person of our Lord Christ means honor, greatness, and worship. So he's not one in the same way that Paul and Peter are one. No, he's one in the sense that honor, that he has one honor and one greatness and one worship. And he says, the person of Christ declares it to be a person of honor, not of the ousia of the two natures, not of the essence of the two natures. So it's not the person of Christ isn't the two natures. It's a person of honor, person of unity, of honor or worship or etc. or properties. Now we'll move on to the Chalcedonian view. So first off, we have the rejection of a union of individual and number. For this, I decided to quote Theodoret of Cyrus and John of Damascus. I decided to quote Theodoret of Cyrus because even though they agree with us that before Chalcedon he was Nestorian, they say that after Chalcedon he repented and was no longer a Nestorian. So here he says, those who met at Chalcedon take the word hypostasis instead of person in the sense of mutual proximity. In fact, hypostasis is used sometimes also of several individuals who together form a single collectivity. So for Theodoret, in his defense of Chalcedon, the Council of Chalcedon, to John of Aiga, I don't know how that's pronounced, he says that... Ageia, okay. So he's saying that the word hypostasis, as it was used in the Council of Chalcedon, it merely just means the one person of the Nestorians. It just means a group of individuals, a common name for a bunch of individuals. And so, since this is a defender of Chalcedon, this is someone who is exonerated in Chalcedon, defended by the Chalcedonians, and by the Eastern Orthodox, he's called Blessed Theodoret. Here he's explicit about his beliefs. He says that hypostasis is merely several individuals, and that's what they understand by it.
And have we found which synod that the Melchites call him blessed, or if this is just Photius? I know Photius says it, but do we know if they have any sort of like big council that calls him this?
Not sure, but I know a bunch of their fathers do. For example, Seraphim Rose. He's a very famous. Also, I mean, in Constantinople too.
Or what's the work other than the letter to John of Achaia that's on the screen? What's the other one?
The other quote?
Yeah, what's the other one source?
John of Damascus. His work on De Duabis and Christo Voluntatibus. So this work is about two wills of Christ. This is a work by John of Damascus, very famous one. And so what he does here is he makes an analogy for the union. because he's being asked how is there not two hypostases if there are multiple hypostatic properties, multiple individual properties. So the analogy he gives is that the son of a man named Nestor and the son of a particular horse. Each of these are distinct, but because they have different essences, then even their hypostatic properties are called natural properties. So according to John of Damascus, the son of Nestor and the son of a particular horse are not two natures. Are not two hypostases, they're two natures.
So wait,
Which
John of Damascus coincidentally used somebody whose name is Nestor.
I know it's hilarious.
He says
The
son
demon,
Nestor. Did he come
the
Nestor
demon,
for the horse or for the man? Because I forget.
Huh.
yeah,
Interesting.
the man is Nestor.
That's
The horse doesn't have a name.
Yeah.
purely
Yeah, it
coincidence.
actually says that
Yeah,
in the
purely coincidental.
Purely.
Yeah. And so he
Yeah,
says
it's
that
pretty funny.
perhaps
I was once telling Melchite about this, and he was very firm in his position from what I gathered before this. And then when I showed him he's like telling his other Melchite, he's like, "But look how he said son of Nestor," and I'm like, "Okay, you're reading a lot into that. It's funny. Maybe he was making a joke, but."
So
Average John Damascus L.
they don't read Cyril's 12 anathemas. They accept Ibas's letter. They accept Theodoret. All the guys who lose in Ephesus 431 win at Chalcedon. The guys who win at Ephesus 431 lose at Chalcedon. And then they're using examples of people that coincidentally are named Nestor. It's like they're rubbing it in. Like, hey guys, we won. And look what examples we're using.
it gets worse. As you'll see in the rest of the quote, he talks about how each of the two natures have different hypostatic properties. For example, that humanity has a shape of the body, expression of the face, and he is the son of the Virgin. And as for the divinity, he is the son of God without shape. He says that these aren't different hypostases, but they're different natures on one hypostasis. So his point is different hypostatic properties, but somehow not two hypostases, just one, just two natures.
And my understanding is this actually, that what John of Damascus is saying contextually there is if you consider one of the parts, even the human part, in isolation by itself, that means it is a hypostasis. But just that when you compare two hypostases from two different Lucia with each other, then you aren't comparing them, you can't compare them as hypostases, but only as essences. That's why I think actually the quote from St. Gregory of Nyssa about this very thing is so important. Do you have that quote from St. Gregory of Nyssa that you know I'm talking about in the presentation?
Yeah.
Okay. So once we go over that, the viewer has to connect that one to this one because it looks like there's a chain between a certain Armenian theologian who read this by St. Gregory of Nyssa, and then when John of Damascus was responding to him, John of Damascus just like says 180 opposite of what the Armenian theologian says here, but is also coincidentally saying the opposite of what St. Gregory says, because he says that if you compare a particular horse and a particular man, you're not comparing just essences but also hypostases.
Yeah, Saint Gregory of Nyssa, he says in Ad Graecus, a work of his called Ad Graecus is To the Greeks. He says that a man and a horse are distinguished by both hypostases and essence. But here John of Damascus says that a man and the horse are only distinct in essence but not hypostases, because even the hypostatic properties become natural somehow. And so it's just absurdity. It's just the length that they're trying to go to just to explain their Christology. Now Christ is the same as a man named Nestor and a horse. The amazing analogy, John, but I don't know how it fixes your problem. And so he moves on at the end. Yeah, he says that I guess the natural hypostatic properties of the divine and human nature just become one of the same hypostases. I don't know how. I mean, the guy just admitted that they're separate. They each have their own hypostatic properties. They are each in their own sphere, two natures, but somehow the hypostatic properties become natural. And so here you have John of Damascus admitting that the natures are individual. The natures possess their hypostatic properties, but they somehow coexist in one hypostasis or one person, as he says. And so next we have the
Got a pinned comment. Are we supposed to address the pinned comment?
Which one?
Sorry.
Theodore one.
Go for it. Sure.
Yeah. So, and we already kind of had addressed that the subject in a sense, so it might be helpful to go through that right now. Theodoret is semi-based, since the commenter, his writings were condemned, but he repented and condemned the heretic Nestorians. So, thank you, Mr. Hallberg, for the comment. But as we've went over already, Theodoret not only did not repent, but he continued in his school of classical Nestorianism after the Council of Chalcedon even. And we also went over how in the Council of Chalcedon, that was not only not repentant, but he was saying that he and his teachers, meaning Theodore of Mopsuestia and Theodore of Tarsus, were always Orthodox. And so if that's repentance, then you also have to accept that Marmari Emmanuel is Orthodox in Christology, even if you think he's a schism from your denomination. And yeah, so Theodoret's works after the council are Nestorians. How did he repent? It doesn't make any sense. And that's why you have the first Chalcedonians, like, for instance, Gennadius of Constantinople and Macedonius the second of Constantinople. That's why you have them in their Christology after Chalcedon. Be super, super Nestorian in various ways, and Macedonius the second even venerated Nestorius and considered him and had to debate on whether it's basically on whether Nestorius.
Daniel, can you put discourses on put your phone close to the mic, please?
It's literally like on. Like I don't know where else to put it. It's the closest.
All right.
Yeah, but let me
hear any of that.
I heard it.
Would you guys like me to put up the acts of the minutes of Chalcedon where Theodoret so-called repented?
Sure, please.
All right.
I have a question. That Elijah, why did Theodoret, after the Final Reunion, condemn Saint Cyril after he heard of his death?
So let me say this. Let me say this real quick, please. So this guy, Elijah, he's saying he repented and condemned the heretic Nestorius. So if I believe what Theodore of Mopsuestia taught, or Theodoret of Cyrus, or John of Antioch, Dominus II, Ibas, if I believe like this, Parsoma of Nisibis, if I believe these guys, but I condemn Nestorius, am I automatically Orthodox because I condemn Nestorius? So you can believe what Nestorius taught, as long as you condemn Nestorius, you're Orthodox. So the only difference between Nestorius and the Chalcedonians is Nestorius, his person. The teaching is the same, but the person is what's different. Like you have to condemn Nestorius, but everything else is okay. So you can believe because Theodore of Mopsuestia himself taught Mother of God, no problem. That's why my Marmari is saying Mother of God, no problem. That's how he says it. Do you want hummus? Do you want baba ghanoush? That's what he's saying. You want lasagna, pizza? No problem. He's playing with you. These guys played you guys. For 1,500 years, you've been played. So they're saying to you the same exact thing that they taught, but you just condemn Nestorius. Everything else is the same. Are you a child? It's like here's this item, or else here's the item, now it has gift wrap. It's the same thing. Anyway, we have
All right.
another.
All right, I can present now.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, can you go ahead and pin it for me?
Yeah.
All right, so here we have the minutes of Chalcedon, and this is page 254, I think, from volume 2. This is the eighth session of Chalcedon, and so here we have line 4. They ask him, "Let Theodoret pronounce an anathema now, anathema on Nestorius." And so he says, "I have submitted a petition from the emperor and another document from the bishops who represent Pope Leo. If it please you, let them be read in your presence, so learn what I think." So he has a petition which he wrote to the emperor and to Pope Leo, and he wants it to be read so that they know his beliefs before they condemn him. And so the bishops say, "We don't want anything to be read, anathematize Nestorius now." So their only issue apparently is they don't care if he's Orthodox or not, they just care to anathematize Nestorius.
Yes.
Theodoret says, "I, by the grace of God, was raised among the Orthodox, and both received and have passed on Orthodox instruction. Not only Nestorius and Eutyches, but every human being who holds unorthodox views I reject and consider alien." Very funny statement. He was raised among the Orthodox. Who are the Orthodox he was raised around? He was raised around Theodore of Mopsuestia, Nestorius, etc. And he
Now, look. So, look what they're asking him to do. They're asking him to anathematize Nestorius. They're not saying anything about Cyril. They're not saying anything about the 12 anathemas. They're only saying anathematize Nestorius. And this is what's going on here. It's just a name thing. It's just like we condemn this guy at the third council. We're pretending like we're the continuation of that. So we just need you to do this. Anathematize this guy so we can keep going. And look what happens the next century at the fake church's fifth council. They anathematize this guy's writings, but not his person, because he got exonerated here. They don't want to contradict it, so they have his writings anathematized in the fifth council. It's a big joke. You believe a guy's in heaven, you call him blessed, but you can't read anything he wrote. Who you guys? Who are you? Who are you kidding? Wake up!
Also, at the Second Council of Constantinople, they anathematize anyone who worships Christ into natures. And so, how is this not a contradiction of Chalcedonianism, especially since those who come after it, such as John of Damascus, completely disregard this and is willing to fall under his own sect's anathema? So,
Right.
and it's a rightful anathema, because we've already pretty much gone over, if you worship Christ into natures, then your worship is divided and you're really worshiping two persons.
Or they worship all of mankind.
Go ahead.
By the way, is this better for the voice transmission? I'm asking you, Dionysius, I guess, right?
You sound really clear.
Okay, good.
Go, Ican. You want to go ahead with the minutes?
Okay, sure. And so he says he both received and have passed on Orthodox instruction. So here he's even saying, "I've always been Orthodox. I've passed it on. I've received it, etc." And they tell him, "Nope, just condemn Nestorius, man. We don't care. Just condemn him." And so he continues, "In truth, I shall say nothing except what is pleasing to God. For I shall convince you that I am not concerned about a seat, nor am I after honor. I haven't come here for this reason, but since I was calumniated, I have come to prove that I am Orthodox, and that I anathematize Nestorius and Eutyches and whoever says two sons." So he's not here to actually repent. He's here to prove he's Orthodox. But since they're telling him, "No, condemn Nestorius and Eutyches," he's like, "Okay, I'll do that, but also I'm Orthodox, by the way." And they're just like, "Okay, say clearly you condemn Nestorius. We don't care. Just condemn him." And then he's like, "If I may explain what I believe, I don't need anything else." And then they just turn on him. He's a heretic. He is a Nestorian. Drive out the heretic. And then Theodoret just finally gives up, anathema to Nestorius, and whoever does not say the Holy Virgin is Theotokos, and whoever divides the only begotten Son into two sons. I've signed the definition of the faith and letter of the most sacred Archbishop Leo. blah 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 blah.
Mhm.
And so they even call him may the church receive back the Orthodox teacher. Funny thing about this.
Yeah,
At,
he says the opposite. He says he wasn't received as a teacher.
yeah, Justinian in his letter on the 3 chapters, he says that the fathers of Chalcedon did not accept Theodoret as a teacher or father. Very funny. Big
Read
contradiction.
your own counsel, Justinian. What are you doing?
Yeah.
Justinian can't read.
Well, if he can't count either, apparently, because he's counting a tetrad in the Trinity once he counts the individual.
As Yusuf Salib would say, the main error of the Melkites is the inability to read.
All right, let me go back to the presentation.
Is this the whole presentation?
Sorry, I left on accident.
It's okay.
All right, let me share my screen. Here it is. All right, back to the presentation. By the way, more evidence that Theodoret did not repent. He says here, hypostasis just means several individuals. Pretty clear. This is literally what this whole presentation has been about, showing that they're not Orthodox and we are. We accept the union of individual. They don't. And also, I'll show more on this later about Theodoret. You'll see in about 2 slides. But anyways, I just want to mention this real quick. Again, very explicit. They accept the union of homonym, which is names. Theodore the Studite, the big guy in their church who I guess defended against the iconoclasts. He says, "For this is the nature of the image, to be identical according to resemblance of the prototype, and to be different according to the account of substance, in which one finds homonym." So his point is, since the humanity of Christ is an image of his divinity, they are united, and they're called one hypostasis in the sense of just sharing a name, in the sense of homonym. So this is what we've been talking about all along. If we go back to the very early slide about what homonym is.
Is this Theodore the Studite?
Yeah, we have from Aristotle the definition of homonym, which is what he's going off of. When things are united only in name. Again, Dr. Sergei Trostiansky, he talks about how the idea that Christ is a homonym, a union of homonym, comes from Theodore of Tarsus. So here we have them explicitly accepting it, and you'd notice that the iconophile period of the Chalcedonians are actually the most Nestorianizing Chalcedonians, such as John of Damascus and Theodore the Studite.
And also the condemnation, it's a rightful condemnation, but it exposes more about what they believe, is the condemnation of agraptodocetism. And so many of our viewers will be familiar with aphthartodocetism, meaning basically a docetism of impassibility that Julian of Halicarnassus preached. Well, the Chalcedonians had a weird problem with the iconoclasts because the iconoclasts were trying to use Christology as a refuge for rejecting icons of Christ altogether. And so they said that because the humanity which united to Christ is just the essence and not a hypostasis, that therefore that Christ didn't assume hypostatic idioms. And so because he didn't assume any hypostatic idioms and just the essential, then therefore you can't depict in an icon that which has no particular hair color or shape or whatever. And the response to this was, okay, well, that's heresy because Christ obviously did compose with himself the human nature with hypostatic idioms, which is actually just Christology 101. But the problem is that now that they're admitting that there are hypostatic idioms, they also have to admit with us that the two natures which compose Christ are individual. So then, do they become one nature, or do they remain two? And if they remain two, then they remain two individuals.
Oh, I just realized. Daniel, can you pin my presentation?
Oh, my bad.
Yeah, I just realized it wasn't pinned all along. So
Well,
here's what I was talking about.
If I can real quickly just answer this cracking crisps
Go ahead.
thing. Okay, so that's a good question. The reason why it's a good question, because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, the Dioscoros in the Latin tradition, Aquinas is kind of like the seal of their tradition in a way where he kind of compiles the fathers into one person.
Right.
So
it's actually a really good thing, but I don't think Saint Severus is the equivalent to Aquinas in Oriental Orthodoxy. I would say is Saint Gregory of Patev's Book of Questions,
as well as Saint Gregory Bar Hebraeus.
I'm gonna go ahead and add Saint Severus to that because I'm Syriac and I want to. So
Daniel, I would say in the Syriac tradition, it's more so Saint Gregory Bar Hebraeus.
Saint Gregory, okay, that's a good option. Okay, yeah, these are all good options. Oh, how about can I say it like this, guys, and tell me if I'm wrong? Saint Severus was this before this. Is that okay to say?
Yeah.
Saint Severus would be the Chalcedonian equivalent of maybe Anastasius of Sinai's what's it called, Vieille Douce or whatever.
Okay.
Yeah, and Daniel, can you pin the question by cracking crisps about why that our hierarchs declare the two chronological understandings to be orthodox? Can you pin that real quick?
Is that this one?
Yeah. So I want to just touch on this real quick. I want to say that virtually, practically no Oriental Orthodox church today fully accepts the original dialogues from the last century. In the Syriac church, it seems that now there's actually no dialogue, no agreement or anything between the churches of Antioch, because His Holiness, it was a whole big situation. I believe, Daniel, you can talk about this real quick for us, so I don't miss any details.
Regarding what exactly?
Yeah, the disagreement. I mean, the agreement between the Mar Ignatius from the second and the Melkite Patriarch is fully off.
Okay, so 1 second, please.
Sure. All right. In the meantime, I'll talk about the Coptic Church.
In the meantime, I'm here. I want to just say His Holiness actually supported this show. One second.
Yeah. So the last episode we did, you guys want to catch it about the legitimacy of the Patriarchate of Antioch. His Holiness actually, after seeing it, gave us his encouragement and blessings, and we were very thankful to him for that. May his prayers be with us always, and may God protect him and keep him and preserve him for us. Ala Rasna, in the Patriarch of Antioch in the Syriac Orthodox Church. Baruch Morkum Rabu. So in the it seems like we said in the last episode, and we're going to repeat it now. The agreement with the Antiochians, the pastoral agreement that existed, is de facto no longer applied. So don't expect a paper to come out to say it. It will be lost to history. Kind of like other agreements that were made in history between the two sides have been lost to history. So things have gone back now to how they were traditionally speaking.
Yeah, and so for the Syriac Church, the whole situation with the agreements and stuff is fully, I would say, pretty much fully off. For the Armenian and the Ethiopian and the Eritrean churches, they never accepted the dialogues to begin with. In fact,
rejected.
Can I ask Cracking Crisps, when he's saying our hierarchs declare the two chronological understandings to be
Christological is what he meant to say there, I think.
Okay,
yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So
is he talking about Pope John Paul II? Is that what he's talking about? Which ones is he saying?
I think he's talking about.
We didn't have a Christological agreement, as far as I know. We don't have one.
I think we had theologians who agreed on their own.
Oh, is he
But we never have.
talking about the one at the residence in Mbabishoy in Egypt?
Yeah,
Is that
those.
I think so. I think so.
okay?
was-
If you get you Coptic Brothers and
Yeah.
whoever else, guys, please feel free to
Yeah.
tell me
So
about it. Go for it.
so the dialogues, as I mentioned, that we had in the past century with the Eastern Orthodox, these are practically accepted by no Oriental Orthodox Church today, at least not fully. For I was going over it bit by bit. The Syriac Church, as Daniel mentioned, any pastoral agreements or whatever are fully off. So there's really nothing going on between them anymore. For the Armenians, Eritreans, and Ethiopians, they actually never accepted the dialects to begin with. In fact, the Ethiopians called the Council of Chalcedon the Canonical of Canines, and they refused to accept Chalcedon and any of the Chalcedonian fathers. They refused to lift the anathemas. As for the Coptic Church, which is the last church in the list, it gets a little bit complicated. And I kind of need to go into the history of the matter. So the agreements themselves, they teach Christological orthodoxy. I've gone over the agreements, and there's nothing that contradicts our faith. And in fact, it contradicts their faith on many points.
Even the Mbabishoy one?
Yes, it actually contradicts.
A little bit sloppily worded compared to the latter agreements, and it honestly does look like some of the intent of some of the people who are giving input was not fully informed on basic Cyrillian Christology of a union of hypostases. But at the same time, it can be interpreted in an orthodox way. But that's the ones of precedent are the latter agreements, right? Because that's how it developed.
Yeah. And so Mbabishoy actually has a paper on Saint Severus of Antioch where he clarifies that Saint Severus taught a union of hypostases and all that stuff and how it's orthodox and stuff. So it's just a terminology topic. But I want to mention that for them, it's actually the dialogues will be kind of heretical by the standards of their old beliefs, the standards of the history of the Chalcedonians. These dialogues would be fully heretical by those standards, according to the Chalcedonians. So the Chalcedonians who did accept these dialogues, I would consider them basically orthodox. But the issue is they're no longer accepting their traditional faith. They no longer have the faith that they've held to for years. And that's why only 3 churches of the Eastern Orthodox have accepted it: the Alexandrians, the Antiochians, and the Romanians. To add on to that,
everyone else is supposed to actually be baptized upon being received in the Coptic Orthodox Church, and in the Ethiopian and Eritrean Orthodox churches, they don't even chrismate those 3. They just baptize everyone. They baptized a king who was previously received into the Melkite denomination on Mount Athos, but then this African king converted to Ethiopian Orthodoxy, and they baptized him.
And as I mentioned, I want to go into the later history. The Holy Synod in 2007, they realized that the other Chalcedonians, actually, the other Eastern Orthodox churches who did not accept the dialogues are actually Nestorian. They teach what's called an energetic union instead of a substantial union, a natural union. And so the whole accidental union we've been talking about so far, the church has found that these Chalcedonians still accept it to this day. And even in the time of the original dialogue,
it's the union according to grace.
Yeah. And even in the time of the original dialogues from the past century, Mbabishoy mentioned how he spoke to Pope Shenouda, and they did not actually lift the anathemas on any Nestorians. On any Chalcedonian Nestorians. And they don't plan on it. They don't plan on lifting the anathemas on anyone in specific, but they'll just say that we lifted the anathemas in a broad sense, and that whoever is not Nestorian, okay, whatever. Whoever is, he's still condemned, in the same way that, for example, in the Eucharist, we say that the Eucharist is for the forgiveness of sins. But the reality is that whoever takes of it unworthily is not forgiven of his sins. But whoever is taken of it worthily in a worthy manner and accepts it, he is forgiven of his sins. So it matters. Even if we say this, it's still, there's a distinction to be made.
And then
also
every Orthodox
his service on
service.
earth, now his service is in heaven as he prays for us His Holiness, towards the end of his life, he commissioned for Christology and the Council of Chalcedon by Father Shenouda Ishaq to be written. And so this is an endorsement by the church and an endorsement of the contents therein. And the contents therein shows that even the modern day Melkites are not Orthodox, and moreover actually remind us of the classical Nestorians from the time of the Council of Ephesus for rejecting a natural union, which was the principal reason for which the Melkites could not accept the final agreed statement, which spoke about how the natures are only distinct en theoria and accepted as the basis of Christological agreement would be St. Cyril's classically, not just Miaphysite letters, but about the heresy of Diophysitism as a heresy, such as letter 40 to St. Akaki to Melitene, the second letter to Census, etc., etc.
In every Orthodox church, Armenians, Copts, Ethiopians, Eritreans, all of us, we still maintain prayers that condemn Chalcedon and condemn their hierarchs. So how could we be? How could there be?
We say that they're heretics. In the Armenian Apostolic Orthodox Church, whenever they have a priest, the day before his ordination is the rite of the calling to the priesthood, and there he has to condemn all of the ranks of Diophysites alongside Nestor and Macedonius, etc. And yeah, that's not even a question. And then the Ethiopian synod, when this happened, they said explicitly that they will never lift the anathemas, because these anathemas have been in place for 1,500 years and imposed by the Orthodox fathers against the Chalcedonians. And so to consider them saints or to even lift the anathemas on them would be a disrespect, and so will not be done.
Yeah. And by the way, Maximus of Constantinople, Gregory Palamas, and I think one more, maybe John of Damascus, were explicitly found by the Holy Synod to be teaching this energetic union idea. This is mentioned in Anbab Shoi's paper called Deifying Energy and Grace. He has a paper on the decisions of the Holy Synod in 2007. And so it shows our modern opinion on the dialogues, the original dialogues from the past century. And so that was just a summary for Cracking Crisps. We don't believe that their theologians historically taught what we believe at all. As I'm showing right now, I mean, it's in front of everyone. We have here.
I don't even believe their theologians are any different from the classical Nestorians, because the difference between the classical Nestorians and the Melkites of general history, maybe excluding a small period of time in the Second Council of Constantinople, that it's the difference between the classical Nestorians and them is only semantical at best, and a lot of the time it's not even semantical.
Yeah. And so, yeah, it's very explicit. It doesn't get more explicit than this. We have here Theodore, the student, literally accepting the union of homonym. Here, John of Damascus worships the two natures of Christ. Which again, heresy. You can't just worship two things, otherwise you'll have two worships, as we talked about earlier. And then here we have the biggest point, the Chalcedonian acceptance of the union of homonym property/accidents. Again, going back to our friend Elijah Halberg, here Theodoret even quotes Nestorius as a source. He cites him to show his Christology. He says, when the commonality and the difference is between person and hypostases, and on the other hand, nature, we have shown clearly in that treatise, on behalf of which we are giving an apology. Namely, so here's the important part. Person is applied to those who are divided in their natures and have their union only in conjunction. I wish I included a quote from John of Damascus on this. I can actually try and get it right now. If someone wants to take over for a second.
Which quote from John of Damascus do you want?
The quote where he talks about how things, whenever they're united, they become one.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Only one according to what they're united to.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, what does he say that in, against the Jacobites?
Yeah. Contra Jacobitis. Yeah. Okay. I will find it right now if someone just wants to give a quick commentary while I include the quote in the presentation.
Well, we can just summarize it. It's fine. So basically he says like that when things unite, such as the natures, that they are only united according to the principle that they become one. And so John of Damascus is one of the Chalcedonians who isn't afraid of admitting that he believes that the natures are divided according to their own logos. He will say that explicitly, and that they're only united according to hypostasis. But again, get back to the man and the horse thing. Apparently for John of Damascus, one hypostasis can even be two heterosubstantial hypostases just juxtaposed to each other and just reckoned as one by conjunction. Again, just like Theodoret of Cyrus and Nestorius of Constantinople, and arguably Theodore of Mopsuestia, who is argued to have been, and this is actually a very early Oriental Orthodox apologetic, very early, from a Syriac manuscript, that Theodore of Mopsuestia was the first to say one hypostasis in two natures.
Yeah. All right, I'm back now. So as we can see here, first quote from Theodoret, one person or one hypostasis, as he teaches. This is again in defense of Chalcedon. He says that this is only applied to things which are divided in their nature, but are only united by conjunction. As Nestorius says, I divide the natures, but I unite the adoration, I unite the worship. Again, from John of Damascus, he says, the same one hypostasis cannot differ from itself in that which is constitutive and characteristic of it, and separates it from the other hypostases of the same species. This is a very big sentence with a lot of big words, so I'll just explain it real quick. He's saying that a single hypostasis can differ from itself from in the hypostatic properties. So you can't have like two sets of hypostatic properties. There must be one set. And so he says, by this I mean the hypostatic idioms, the hypostatic properties. So he's defining himself here. The aggregate of which cannot be seen in another hypostasis. And so his whole point is that Christ has one set of hypostatic properties. The two natures share the same hypostatic properties. And this is supported by the definition of hypostasis in their Council of Nicaea too. This is the 7th Chalcedonian Ecumenical Council. It says, for we say that an hypostasis is an essence with individualizing characteristics. So according to the Chalcedonians, the hypostasis of Christ is two essences or two natures, but one set of individualizing properties, one set of individual properties. So again, their union is not two things becoming one. Their union is not a substantial union, not a whole from parts, not two becoming one. Their union is two things sharing the same properties, two things having the same hypostatic properties, which are called accident.
Or a divisible whole rather than an indivisible whole.
Yeah.
Like Lego blocks or something like that.
To support this, I gathered two quotes from John of Damascus's Contra Jacobitis. By the way, this book is against us Oriental Orthodox. We are the Jacobites, as he's been historically called. So this is a book against us, and in it he says, but if they say that the things that are united are one, listen, for the things that are united are not one in every way, but as they are united. So he clarifies this in the next paragraph. Things that are united are one as they are united. Peter and John, because they are united in nature, are consubstantial and are one in essence. But the soul and body, because they are united in hypostases, are not one in essence. So according to John of Damascus, Peter and John are united in nature, but soul and body are united in hypostasis, but not in nature. And anything that is united in nature or anything that is united, it's one, but one in the thing that's united in. So he doesn't believe there's one nature out of two. He doesn't believe in a natural union, a union in nature. He believes that there's one set of properties out of two, as he says here, one collection of properties for the two natures. The natures are only united by sharing properties. That's his view. His view is not the same as us, where the two natures become one, or the two hypostases become one. This is basically the end of showing how they're same. But I wanted to add one more thing. I recently came across this quote, a very interesting quote for me. It's ignore that saint right there. It's actually from Gregory Palamas, who's not a saint, but he's canonized for the Eastern Orthodox. I got this from an Eastern Orthodox person. This is from his 150 natural, theological, and ethical and practical chapters, chapter 138. In it, he says, the energy, which means operation or activity, of the three divine hypostases is not one in the sense of similarity as it is with us. Rather, the divine energy is really one. Indeed, it is one in number. So, as you can see here, his view of the divine energy of the Trinity is that it's numerically one, and one individual energy, which is correct. But then he says, it's not the same in the sense of similarity as it is with us. So you'll often see many people saying that us humans have one energy. Palamas here explains that for us, when we say one energy, it's just in a sense of similarity. But in reality, each individual human has his own energy, his own operation, his own action. And the Trinity likewise has its own action, but it's one for the Trinity, whereas it's multiple for us. Now, the question for the Chalcedonians is if this quote is true. If the Trinity has one numerical energy, but each human individual has his own numerical energy, and you say that there are two energies of Christ, then how are there not necessarily two individuals of Christ? Which again, that's the whole thing I've been trying to show so far. They believe in two individuals, as John of Damascus says here explicitly, and Theodoret of Cyrus. They don't believe in a union of individual or number as we do. They believe in a union of homonym, names, worship, properties, accidents, not one nature out of two, or or one hypostasis out of two.
Yeah, and like Saint Cyril says, and against Theodore and Theodore, two powers will come to two persons and two hypostases.
Yes, he says it right here. If you teach two energies, two powers, two wills, whatever, go ahead, man. But that just means you have two worships for Christ, and you worship two hypostases or persons.
And so really, we didn't cover, I don't think, at least, because I was late. My apologies again. I don't think we covered what that fanatic Coptic video covered about a week ago in his Council of Ephesus video. But this is just, if any Chalcedonians are listening, no hard feelings, of course, but you gotta look at what the Council of Ephesus teaches in anathematizing diophysitism in the homilies of Saint Theodotus of Incyra, which were delivered in Ephesus and accepted by Ephesus and are literally part of the acts of the Council of Ephesus. And various stuff about what Saint Cyril's third letter to Nestorius says, and about Saint Acacius of Melitine's letter to him, who was also a presiding bishop at the council with Saint Cyril. So was Saint Theodotus of Incyra, by the way. Yeah, look at all of these things, and you'll see that at the very least, if you want to confess that a union merely by homonym, then you can't claim to accept the Council of Ephesus. Mm-hmm. Because if you want to go down that route, you really have to go the full way and go the Assyrian Church of the East route.
So, question: do the Chalcedonians admit explicitly that they believe in a union of homonym?
Yeah, Theodore said it.
Okay. Yeah, here, right here. Oops, all the way down here. Right there. This was.
I don't know if anyone else other than him does, but I mean, I know Leo of Chalcedon says that because
by the way, Leo of Chalcedon is different from Leo of Rome. Not Pope Leo of Rome. Leo of Chalcedon is from the 11th century.
I said Leo of Chalcedon, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just clarifying for the people who don't know.
Okay. All right.
And there's a very good paper on this by Dirk Krosmuller. It's called Leo of Chalcedon. Let me see if I can find it real quick.
Congratulations, Chalcedonians. Good job.
Okay, here it is. It's on academia.edu. Can I share my screen real quick for this paper?
Oh, sorry. How do
I? Here, let me stop sharing and let me share this one. Here it is. Can you pin it, Daniel?
Yeah.
After this, we have input from Mr. Solomon. So whenever we do the next thing, we'll address this.
Okay. So here's a paper. This is very good paper about the icon theology of Leo of Chalcedon and Theodore the Studite, and also there's a book by Dr. Theodore Tollefson on Theodore the Studite. Is very good and excellent and shows how his teaching on homonym in Christ is still present. And actually got this quote about the definition from Aristotle for homonym all the way back here. I got this quote from the book about Theodore the Studite by Dr. Theodore Tollefson. And let me see. Okay, yeah, we can address the quote by, the question by Mina Solomon.
It's two parts because he made another part of it. I'll read the whole thing as a continued. Sorry, I'm listening early in this. When you mentioned Theodore of Mopsuestia believing that Jesus is deified, I would actually argue that he never believed Jesus was deified. He believed Jesus is God by will and obedience, but not by partaking of the divine nature as we would believe any man can be. So it's worse in a Nestorian system. I just wanted to start with something. So thank you for this input. And there's, a lot of profundity to this, such as the fact that part of the classical Nestorian system is a Pelagian soteriology. But it's also important to realize that Chalcedonianism also confesses that the union of Christ is according to grace, because they believe that it is just a union according to grace, or a union according to energy. Now, it's also important to realize that Photius of Constantinople, who is one of the leading theologians for Melkites within the last, 1,300 years, he's within the top few. He endorsed Theodore of Mopsuestia's ideas of original sin, and so rejection thereof, really. And he has a sort of Pelagian ideology. And so when we spoke earlier about how the Coptic Orthodox Synod has condemned the Melkite Christology and also the Palamite idea of theosis, and where it's not really theosis, the true sense of it, but apotheosis, where men become uncreated and unoriginate, even if they say by grace, but that's sophistry. It's important to realize that Chalcedonianism and classical Nestorian here is really just in the same boat. What you can predicate to one, you can predicate to the other very easily. And a lot, again, like we said earlier in the stream, it's only a semantical difference at best. And usually, a lot of the time, at least, it's not even semantical.
Yeah, I'm trying to find a quote from John of Damascus that I had saved on it.
Yeah, sure. Then, sure. So while you're finding that, John of Damascus holds to Theodore of Mopsuestia's same view. Remember, Mr. Solomon, that how you correctly state that Theodore of Mopsuestia believes that Jesus is God by will. The Chalcedonians don't even believe that the human nature is united by will. And so what Saint Cyril was able to at least grant to the classical Nestorians, not even that can be granted to the Melkites ever since the Third Council of Constantinople, because they believe in diotheletism. So now, this is why we say all the time in Subdeacon Daniel, I know you and I talk about this a lot, is that the Melkites have a more divisive Christology than even the classical Nestorians. And that's not to say that the classical Nestorians are justified, because, he who is guilty of one part of the law becomes guilty of the entire law, because he hasn't submitted himself to God.
Yeah, and here I have both quotes on it. Let me just finish highlighting all this important stuff. Or why not? I'll just go ahead and talk about it. Yeah, so Thomas, thank you so much for your response. But also, I want to add here we have the quote from Theodore of Mopsuestia. He says, should we call Mary the mother of men or the mother of God? And Theodore responds, we should say both, one by nature and one the other by relation. And so for Theodore, there are two sons of Mary, the man and God. Why else would he say both?
But to be explicit, just so that the Chalcedonians, if they're watching, Theodoret, he condemns two sons at the council, right?
Yeah.
Theodore never said there are two sons.
Yeah, and neither. Yeah.
So Theodore doesn't believe that there are two sons. He wouldn't say that explicitly.
He
But
actually claimed to reject it as condemnatory.
right. So
Say
what
two
we're
sons.
saying is that logically it follows that eventually your Christology leads to two sons, even if you don't want to say it.
And to our friends who are watching, and even to those who are not part of the faith who are watching, you and I and everyone else might realize that the Council of Ephesus rightly condemns Nestorius for confessing two Christs, two Lords, two Sons, even though Nestorius never explicitly said two Christ, two Lords, two Sons, and actually condemned and rejected the idea. At least he claims to. But the problem is that the reductio of Nestorius' position, the entailment of it, is a confession of two sons, two Christ, and two Lords, even if he's always talking about one Christ and one Lord. And it's the same for the Chalcedonians. There's no way to justify one and basically condemn the other, is the point.
Yeah. And so here we have a comparison between Theodore of Mopsuestia in his book on the Incarnation and John of Damascus in his book on the Orthodox faith. So for Theodore, he's asked, is Mary the mother of a man or the mother of God? He says both, one by nature and the other by relation. John of Damascus addresses a similar question. Why is the Virgin called the mother of God? Just like Theodore gave two reasons for why she's the mother of X, or which is X is as in man or God. John of Damascus gives two reasons for why she's the mother of God. Because of the nature of the word, whatever that means, and also because of the deification of man's nature. So he's saying that she gave birth to two natures, the word and the man. The one, both of them, she's the mother of both. And both are called God. The word because he is obviously by nature God, and the man because he is deified to become God. And so here we have very explicitly, he says that she's the mother of two things: mother of God by nature and mother of God by deification. And these are distinct from one another. So by that logic, why is there not two sons of Saint Mary? Why is Saint Mary not the mother of two gods? I mean, we very clearly have a distinction of the gods that are born from her. We have the God by deification and the God by nature, and that's not the same thing.
Did you read the excerpts by Marius Mercator while I was gone?
No.
Do you think those would be helpful right now?
In what way?
That's for the next video. No spoilers.
Let us say then there's two Christ, two sons of God, and all of this stuff. And he also speaks about the whole previously divided into its parts is no more divided into its parts and all of this.
No, this is for a separate video.
No spoilers, discourse. No spoilers.
Okay. Lo siento.
Yeah. All right, that's all I have. Any questions? Any questions or any additions?
Yeah, Saint Ignatius says, "Blood of God." Thank you, Superboy. How can there ever be a union between churches if there are anathemas? Can anathemas be lifted? Well, let's consider what an anathema is. Let us what union is.
Guys, I'm so sorry. Turns out they didn't see my presentation this entire time.
What do you mean? Yeah, they did.
Yeah, they did.
No.
No, I was looking
It
at
was still on the paper by Dr. Dirk Krosmuller. I'm so sorry, guys. Here's the presentation right now. You can take a look and read it for a couple of
Okay.
seconds.
Screenshots for the homies.
Yeah,
Can you zoom in?
yeah.
Very nice comment by Yusuf Salib. Trinity is Trinity, not tetrad. Very true.
Very true.
Okay, let me answer this question by Set. How can there be a
Wed-
union of churches if there are anathemas? Can anathemas be lifted? So I think it's the wrong question. It's not a matter of can anathemas be lifted. It's about what is true. What is the truth? That should be the question. So if one side is true and the other side is not, then there should the idea is not that, well, they should lift the anathemas. If the side is wrong, the anathemas should stay. And they should accept the truth and join it. Yeah?
Yeah, and also like the very idea of an anathema is that the faithful of God are supposed to be a holy people, and to be holy means to be set aside for what is good and for the things of God. An anathema, or is really just saying, yeah, we're not going to associate with this if we're going to be holy. And so you can't lift an anathema of something bad, like in a true sense, because then you would be saying, you know what, the people of God can be tainted with some heresy or with some ideology which is counter to the gospel of the Lord Jesus Christ. So yeah, you can't lift an anathema like that. Now, if there is a local church, just a local church, not the entire Orthodox communion, but if there is a local church which, say, has condemned someone that in the condemnation was maybe not justified. Some people try to say that Origen's condemnation was merely local. I'm not saying it is or isn't, but and also I think personally that it's pretty clear that Origen should never be lifted, that anathema. But sometimes someone will like bring some hypothetical. What if, John Smith, he was actually pretty good and there was a misunderstanding and his bishop condemned him and his local church condemned him, but the rest of the church didn't adopt it. Well, theoretically you could have an unjust condemnation like that be lifted, but that's not the same thing as the entire universal church.
Okay.
Who had anathematized, say, Diophysitism in the Council of Ephesus.
All right.
So
and the second question is, will there be any upcoming EOO debates in the future? Michael, I think is Michael Apollo. Michael, thank you for your question. You're always welcome here. I hope all is well with you. Long time.
No, he's not welcome.
So I guess Dionysius is not a fan, but I respect Michael. He's okay. So, Michael, there's nothing on the table. The only EOs that I'm in communication with is Craig, to be honest. I hope he's doing well and God bless him, everything he's doing. But there's nothing's been talked about regarding any future debates or nothing like that that I know of. No one's reached out to us. We're kind of been doing this our own thing on non-Chalcedonian island. And then the next question is, would you say that the EO Church is graceless then, or the Roman Catholic Church for that matter? You're asking,
yeah,
Daniel. I'm going to let the Copts answer in a second. I'm going to say that all I know is that there is only one true church, one true Holy Catholic Apostolic Church, and that one has 3 ecumenical councils only. Now, And that's where grace is. That's where salvation is. And outside of that, I don't know anything. Only that.
I
So
wanna
go.
say real quick before Dioscorus gives us a long explanation. Um, grace is in every part of the world. God is in all places, omnipresent in His grace. But however, it's salvific grace. Salvific grace and sacramental grace is only present in the Church of God. That's what I would say. Go ahead, Dioscorus, for the long explanation.
Okay. I want to say something about Saint Theodotus of Ancyra's exposition on the Nicene Creed, and this is I think a very important point that we have to talk about because, and this is related, trust me, is we believe that theology has a very important apophatic component. And so because of this, Saint Theodotus of Ancyra speaks about how in the Creed of Nicaea, he's talking about the original one, not the Constantinopolitan version of the Nicene Creed, but the original one. Contextually, this is clear. He says that they start with the concept of one God the Father. And by this, they do not indicate in any way to indicate duality. They do not mean to signify two things. And so in the same way, when they later introduce the idea of the one Lord Jesus Christ, they did not wish in any way to be indicating a duality. Okay, so this is an apophatic idea of what we believe about the oneness of the Father, means he's not in any way two, and the oneness of Christ, which continues this, is a oneness which is not in any way two. Okay, great. That's good to understand. Well, it's also important to realize that there was the anathema at the end of this creed, which is still recited in the liturgy after the creed in the Armenian Apostolic Orthodox Church, where, if anyone says that there was a time when the Son was not, or the Spirit was, or, actually they didn't talk about the Spirit in the Creed of Nicaea, but let him be anathema. So anyone who deviates from our faith, let him be anathema. Okay, that is itself a sort of apophatic idea of the church, which gets expounded upon at the Council of Constantinople, where it says we believe in one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church of God, or one holy Catholic Apostolic Orthodox Church of God, as we say in the liturgy. And so when the Holy Fathers continue about the one Lord Jesus Christ, the implication, as St. Theodotus says, is being that there is not in any way two. Well, and in the same way that there is one Holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, since that is the Oriental Orthodox communion, then it is not in any way another communion than the Oriental Orthodox Church. Yes, God gives grace to all men, and they are without excuse, actually, St. Paul says. But I'm sorry, that's my rant.
Okay, thank you, Dioscorus. No, we're not in disagreement. Daniel M., he says, God sits on the throne of judgment, not us. He had mercy on all of Israel, but only struck down Uzziah. We will do our best to follow his path to the T and pray his mercy on all. Amin. Okay, Barufail Sim'an, he says there can only be one church according to the Nicene Creed. Amin. Wonderful answer. Why do EO only read 1.5 of Cyril's works? Why do EO only read 2 works from St. Cyril? They only seem to quote only the formula for union and 1/4 of the 2 letters of Cisensis. And that's because Theodoret repented. That's the answer. Okay.
Yeah, but Theodoret repented.
Okay.
Yeah, man, he totally repented, man. Look right here where he quoted Nestorius. He repented, man. Come on, man.
So believe there. He said sorry.
It's okay.
It's okay that his father is Theodore and Theodore are always Orthodox. Come on, man. He advertises Taurus.
Dionysius, do you have the answer to Salib's question?
It's the only 2 works Theodore recorded probably.
Okay. How are we
Some
going?
are Apollinarian forgeries. It's pretty obvious.
There is the rest of forgeries.
Theodoret's refutations of Cyril are Apollinarian forgeries.
I mean, Theodore says that there's no nature without hypostasis in his works against Saint Cyril. So, I mean, that's an Apollinarian take. So they must not be authentic.
The letter of Ibas is an Apollinarian forgery.
Apollinaris condemned himself and against Apollinaris. So who knows?
What's that?
Apollinaris.
I said that unironically, they actually did start claiming that the letter to Maris was a forgery in the Fifth Council, or at least
I know they did. I think they discovered crack before the 20th century, and nobody knows about it.
I think it was more like methamphetamine.
Maybe.
I think opium grows over there. So
cracking crisps is onto something. He's implying that they discovered crack in the Chalcedonian world in 1500 years ago. Okay, so are we done?
Real quick, for anyone watching, on the Theodore of Mopsuestia versus John of Damascus slide, I added at the bottom a quick brief explanation in text of the point I was making about John of Damascus, in case my point didn't come across too well. So you can take a look at it here, and you'll be able to watch it again when the live stream ends, and get any screenshots you want, and etc. Go ahead, Daniel.
Okay, question for you guys. If somebody says, okay, fine, well, the Antiochian school also produced saints like Chrysostom. He was a peer of Theodore, a friend of his. He was a student of Theodore. Well, how do you guys reconcile that? Is that why Theophilus of Alexandria didn't like him? How do we
Funny story. Actually, almost every single scholar on St. John Chrysostom believes that he did not follow his teachers. They even call him Alexandrian. Dr. Hayes, Dr. Alois Grillmeyer, many other scholars. I've read a lot of them on the topic of St. John Chrysostom, and we've even found Miaphysite quotations from St. John Chrysostom. So they all think that he followed the Alexandrian school despite being taught by Antiochians. And one more thing I want to mention real quick. The Antiochian school was not very uniform. For example, we have St. Mark the Ascetic, the student of St. John Chrysostom. Once again, he actually refuted Nestorius. He wrote against Nestorius. He even says that in the creed of the baptismal creed of the Church of Antioch, you have to confess that Christ is one out of two. That's Miaphysite. That's our belief.
Yep.
And the whole book against Nestorius is called On the Incarnation.
I mean, there's no doubt. Let me rephrase. There's no doubt that Chrysostom didn't follow them. But the question is, how could he come out of that school? That's the question.
I think it doesn't always work that way. I mean, that is a very general rule, but we have seen many things that contradict it. For example, Origen, I think everyone at least has to agree that to some extent he had errors. Most would say a heretic, but some, at least even someone who's very loving of Origen and thinks he wasn't a heretic, he at least has to admit that he was in a lot of errors. We see that many of his followers, many of his students, Saint Athanasius, Saint Gregory the Theologian, Saint Basil, many others.
Thaumaturgus.
Yeah, Saint Gregory of Thaumaturgus, who was a friend of his. A lot of them were very, very close to him, learned from him and everything, but didn't hold most of his beliefs. I believe the rare exceptions are Saint Gregory of Nyssa and perhaps maybe Saint Evagrius and Saint Didymus, but I'm not too fully sure on it. So there are cases where someone comes out of the school of his teacher with different beliefs.
Yeah. So let me point this out. This difference. Someone asked the John of Damascus question on the Ethiopian thing. So look at the difference between us and the Chalcedonians. We're honest. When there is an issue like that, we'll say, "Oh no, that's problematic. The guy needs to get removed. He's not a saint. It's wrong. We're straight up about it. He was a Chalcedonian, no doubt.
And he was one of the worst Chalcedonians, by the way. He wasn't Justinian had some redeeming qualities, at least. John of Damascus has very few, if any, redeeming qualities.
Yeah. So
and you don't even judge redeeming qualities. Is he in the church or not?
My point is, we're honest about who the guy is and what communion he belongs to. We don't revise history to fit our stuff. Like these guys will say Simeon the Stylite, Theodora, Peter the Iberian,
Dorotheus of Gaza. Dorotheus of Gaza, yeah.
Yeah, the Gaza saints, even the Nestorian Isaac of Nineveh. They revised history to fit that these guys were all Chalcedonian somehow, or Byzantine, whatever it is that they
think. Even the Gaza saints were anathematized by name by their sixth council, so they can't even do that.
So was Peter the Iberian. So
so it's but that's only the Georgians being weirdos, remember?
Yeah. My point is that we're honest. They pretend like everything's okay, and these guys were Chalcedonian the whole time. Like they lie all the time. Like it's crazy. It's like the whole Ibas's letter all of a sudden not being genuine when they read it in the minutes of Chalcedon 100 years later. Oh, so called, we don't know. It's whatever. Even though the Pope Vigilius had infallibly declared that, hey, this letter is Orthodox.
And speaking of Vigilius, actually, the reason apparently that he got into, I still need to dig into primary sources on this, but the reason that he got into the Roman See in the first place was because Saint Theodora, the faithful empress, designed it so that he would get in if he resolved to overturn Chalcedon. And that's one of the very nice Neophysite moments of the faithful empress Saint Theodora. And also another thing she did was, just so that the viewers can learn about this great saint of ours, is when Justinian was sending Chalcedonian missionaries to some place in Africa, I forget where, she sent her own anti-Chalcedonian missionaries there and made a death threat against some duke, saying that if Justinian's missionaries arrive before hers, that she will have him executed.
She's also saying the church, by the way.
Absolutely. And by the way, Subdeacon Daniel, the podcast we did, or the whatever we did, the show, the live stream we did, that was endorsed by His Holiness. We forgot to mention actually that Saint Theodora, the faithful empress, the common saint, between both the Orthodox and the Melkite communions, that Saint Theodora is really the brains behind the Saint Jacob Baradeus movement in the Syriac Orthodox Church. People forget that a lot of the time. She was the brains behind the entire operation. This is one of the big reasons we venerate her.
And she's a big deal. Why? It's like God protected his church, his See of Antioch especially, through his Saint Theodora.
Exactly. Amen.
Yeah, and I want to just add, so from all the discussion we've had so far, I think it should be clear to everyone that John of Damascus, being in the Ethiopian calendar, that's a mere local canonization, and it's wrong. We all say it's wrong. It's not universal.
It's not even the entire Ethiopian Orthodox Church. Remember what we said about the Ethiopian Synod? They said explicitly that to consider the Chalcedonians as saints would be wrong, and it would be an insult to the Orthodox fathers who condemned.
I just want to. Yeah.
Who do you think that applies to, Habib? It applies to especially the extreme Nestorians, such as John of Damascus.
Yeah, and so this is merely local, so it has no major value, unlike a universal canonization. Now, in contrast, for the Roman Catholics and Eastern Orthodox, mainly the Eastern Orthodox, for example, their Georgian church, the Georgian church, they canonized Saint Peter the Iberian. He was a teacher of Saint Severus. He was anti-Chalcedonian. So this is the analogous case, but they have a bigger issue. They have so many of our saints post-schism who are canonized universally in their church. I'm just going to list a few. Emperor Saint Theodosius II, who actually convened the Council of Ephesus, the Second Council of Ephesus, and respected Saint Dioscorus. Saint Theodora, the Empress. Saint King Elisabin, or Caleb of Oxum. Abba Isaiah of Skeets. Abba Daniel, and he's very well known as well as Saint Anastasia the Patrician, Abba Dorotheus of Gaza, Abba Barsanophanius and Abba John, Abba Longinus, I don't know.
Let's go with Longinus.
Yeah. Yeah, and many other examples. I can't remember all of them. Just how many of them. Oh, Saint Simeon the Stylite. I mean,
Saint David Gareja.
Oh yeah, David of Gareja. All these examples, and I think the nine Assyrian saints who converted.
Yeah, of whom he is one. Of whom he is one.
Yeah, David of Gareja is one of the 9 Assyrian saints who converted the Church of Georgia to Christianity. And actually, he was anti-Chalcedonian. That's why the Georgians were originally anti-Chalcedonian. So they have all these names as universally canonized fathers. They must
So I have
either...
a question about the 9 Assyrians. Okay.
Yeah.
These guys, is it the same 9 who go to Ethiopia who also go to Georgia?
No.
You know, you guys heard of the 9 Assyrian saints who went to
No,
Ethiopia?
what happened? No, what I see what you mean. The thing that happened was that, remember when we were talking on the show about how all of these bishops
sorry, wait, comment.
Dioscorus,
let me stop you real quick.
They had to exile, they had to,
Dioscorus, let me stop you real quick. I need to correct myself. I'm sorry. I want to correct myself. For Georgia, it was the 13 Assyrian fathers. For Ethiopia, it was a 9.
Okay, that's why I was like, that was 9 in Ethiopia.
Yeah.
13 in Georgia.
And
22 Assyrians. So thank you. You're welcome, Ethiopia. You're welcome, Georgia. That's my people.
Yeah, ironically, both were anti-Chalcedonian, but obviously it makes sense since both groups were Assyrian, and afterwards Ethiopia became anti-Chalcedonian and Georgia became anti-Chalcedonian, and many scholars attest to this.
And then it makes sense because the Ge'ez Tewahedo tradition is very similar to the Syriac tradition. Both are Semitic languages, so it fits like theologically the poetry and stuff. There's a lot in common. I know liturgically they're like Alexandria, but theologically the way they express things and was very similar to us, closer than to the Copts, in my opinion.
We have, by the way, I just wanted to explain real quick is that the reason you have these 9 and these 13 going to Ethiopia and Georgia respectively is because of the Libellus of Hormisdas. So because of the persecutions of the church, basically, all of these monastics and bishops and stuff had to flee, right? If they wanted to retain their orthodoxy. If they wanted to capitulate and change the hagiographies of their saints to be Chalcedonian, they would just stay there and go with the flow, if you know what I mean.
Can we comment on Mina Suleiman's I thought Palamas believed there was an energetic union between man and God, not between the natures of Christ. I also wouldn't quote Amba Bishoy, as he has questionable views rejecting theology.
Okay, so first off, the Holy Synod in 2007, to be more clear, it was condemning a book written by an EO monk that was translated into Arabic. And in this book, he taught an energetic union, and he cited Maximus and Palamas for this view. And that's why Amba Bishoy also cited them. And Amba Bishoy is merely summarizing the decisions of the Holy Synod. So he's not writing of his own authority, he's writing on the authority of the Holy Synod, since he was the secretary of the Holy Synod. Now, as regards his views on theosis, I think him and Pope Shenouda have been very misunderstood. Just because they reject the idea that they're rejecting behind the word theosis is the idea held by the Palamites today, that we become fully God, become uncreated and unoriginate, and receive all the divine attributes, as opposed to certain properties such as immortality, incorruptibility, and etc. They believe that we receive all the divine attributes, become identical to God in his act of divinity, which I don't even know how that one works. If we become identical to God in energy, then why is Christ two energies? Why isn't his human energy identical to God's energy? Why is it for us we're identical to God's energy, but for Christ he's just separated on his own? Their views don't really make sense to me on this point. But either way, as I was saying, Anbab Shoy, in this specific case, he was summarizing the decisions of the Holy Synod. And so whether you agree or not, I just want to say that this is the view of the Coptic Church regarding our relations with the Eastern Orthodox and their theology. So whether it's wrong or not is still a point to be made, that we don't agree, at least on Christology, and we don't view them as agreeing.
So thank you, ICANN. Thomas says Daniel must have had divine revelation. I don't have anything of that. It's all ICANN's idea. Thank you, ICANN, for this. Maybe ICANN had the divine revelation that you needed this, Thomas. God bless you. I want to comment a little bit on Barufail's comment. The Church of Alexandria is their mother. The Syriac Church is their grandmother. About the Ge'ez tradition. We don't usually talk about ethnicity here, but I'm gonna give 2 cents on it. In my opinion, the Semitic family, so like Assyrian, Syriac, Aramean, Chaldean people, whatever you want to call this group, Suraye, Suryoye, we call them, and the Hebrews, meaning Mizrahi, Beta Israel people, and the Arabians. We are like this family. There's also the Tigrinya, the Tigray, the Amhara, the Habasha people. We're one family. Like we're cousins. This is one group of people. This is a different ethnic family than, say, our Coptic brothers and sisters, or in Libya or in Sudan, Nubians. This is different. But so this is important to have in mind when understanding theological and linguistic connections, like with the 9 Assyrians who went to the Habasha area. They were able to communicate how, because the languages and the way of thinking is already similar.
Right.
With Metal Miskeen agreed with Theosis. Guys, go for it.
He seems to have agreed with the Palamite view, which is wrong. And that's all that has to be said on the topic.
Okay.
Yeah, we're not going to talk about this subject in certain ways. And so I just wanted to point out, though, that Palamas believing that there's an energetic union between man and God does not preclude that he also believes that the union between the so-called union between the natures of Christ is also energetic. This is clearly how the Chalcedonians view it. I would say just, rewatch the presentation to see that the union is a union of homonym, which is one aspect of our union with God and Theosis is homonymical. Homonymical.
You see the screen? Dioscoros, look at the screen.
Screen. Wait, hold on. Let me hit the button to make it live. Yeah.
Okay, back to the question.
Sanskrit is a heck of a.
No, you get it because of
language.
Hinduism. That's
I get it.
Oh,
right.
Daniel, can you pin the question by Nate J?
Yes, I'm going to it right now.
Okay.
Daniel M. They can't even be deified by their own definition.
Yeah, you cannot become God if God has not become man.
I'm not sure if this is related to the stream, but how come St. Cyril wrote, "In this way we apprehend a single Christ the Lord who subsists in 2 natures"? He didn't say that.
Yeah, that's not existent. I'd like a source. If they have a source, whoever sent you this quote has a source, ask them for it. But I can guarantee you, he did not say this. In fact,
The source is Leontius of Jerusalem.
Which is the only part of it which is preserved is like one sentence, and it's preserved by a notorious forger and interpolator.
Dionysius, someone has a question for you.
Michael A. I'm confused. Is Dionysius who's speaking Thomasinos or someone else? I promise you on my word, Michael A, that Dionysius is not Thomasinos.
The difference is I'm Armenian, and Thomas is not on the stream.
Okay. Nate J, for real? Yes, it's not real. Okay. Palamas be like, yes. Facts. Isaiah 43:10. Before me there was no God, for me there shall there be after me. Thessalonians, this is the will of God, your sanctification. Okay, thank you. Can't I understand Hindi, that is funny. Okay. Are you the same Mina Suleiman from Christian forums?
I think
Do
so.
we agree with Maximus' teaching on the relation between the logos and the logi?
I haven't looked into that question. I don't really know. I don't understand Maximus's teaching on it, and there's actually been a lot of debate on it in the field of studies and stuff. And apparently, I've recently found out it actually seems.
Palamas rejected.
Yeah, it seems like Palamas rejected it, while his opponents, who basically taught the teachings of Aquinas, they seem to have accepted it. So I'm not sure.
Which is kind of interesting though, because it seems like Palamas's apotheosis heresy, where he explicitly says we become uncreated and unoriginate, was originally said by Maximus, and it doesn't look like Palamas was just taking Maximus out of context. And
Yeah.
it seems like they were of one mind on the apotheosis heresy. And by the way, this is the view of the Melkite denomination even to this day. That's why Sophrony of Essex says the same thing about how saints become uncreated, and they also have what's his name, Siluan or something of Athos. There might be others that I'm just not thinking of, but yeah, they all say it.
Yeah, I found the citation for the thing about Palamas. So, by Father Maximus Simon Petritas, Nicholas Constas, in his book Saint Maximus the Confessor: The Reception of his Thought in East and West. In this book, he states that it seems like Palamas did not accept. By the way, this is an Eastern Orthodox priest, so he's saying that it seems that Palamas is against Maximus's view of the Logoi by opposing Barlaam. Barlaam was the opponent of Palamas.
Isn't Barlaam Buddha?
No, different Barlaam.
No, that's Barlaam and Josaphat. So that's a different. This guy is named Barlaam, maybe after that guy. But the Barlaam and Josaphat thing is a Manichaean version of the Buddha narrative that was then subsequently translated into Arabic and then incorporated either by John of Damascus or perhaps a little bit later by like some, I think, Georgian monk.
So you're telling me they have Buddha and they have Hindi stuff?
So they have Buddha stuff according to the Barlaam and Josaphat thing, but then a recent person they canonized like less than 100 years ago has a poem where he basically venerates like Buddha, Krishna, and some other
right.
weirdos,
Okay.
like
so
Zoroaster.
Last question. This is a long now. We're at 2:30. Dang.
Yeah, I know.
Have you heard of EO becoming OO due to theology? Unfortunately, yes. And fortunately, the other side is also true of EO becoming OO because of theology. So it really depends on one's intellectual honesty and humility and dependence on the Holy Spirit. Okay. What do you guys think about David's series against OO? Don't you think it plays a critical role in persuading? I don't know. I think it's not. It's not. How do I say? It's not smart. It's not smart.
To be fair to him,
yeah,
it's not any. It's as good, if not better, than every single one of the historical Melkite apologetics against us.
True.
Like it's no worse than those.
Yeah.
So if anyone's criticizing it, keep in mind that he did a pretty good job according to the tradition he's working with.
Actually, the issue is he's not even working with this tradition. I don't want to critique him too much.
He's not.
Right,
working with
he's
it.
not.
He
And that's
goes
where
off a lot of the stuff he
those
says.
who say that Christ's humanity is anhypostatic and that it is not anhypostatic comes from.
Yeah.
And so obviously, there's some discrepancy between the pro-anhypostatic humanity group and what their historical authorities say.
Yeah, and he's honestly a confused guy in regards to his own Christology. He wouldn't be able to tell you if it's universal or particular. He'll just go off on a random tangent about it's both or it's not both or these aren't categories or something.
Yeah, he doesn't really know a lot about what he's talking about. Like Chalcedon isn't ecumenical until the fifth council, or the thing that I can just say about the universal and the particular. His idea of inhypostatization, this kind of like almost phantasm, Apollinarian type of Neo-Chalcedonian Christology, is totally different from, say,
John of Damascus.
John of Damascus, or even Maximus, and there's a conflict within online Eastern Orthodoxy anyway. They don't all agree on the same Christology. They try to get each other excommunicated.
They disagree on if he's a divine human person or simply just a divine person.
Yeah,
from what I've seen.
Right. You have people like Erhan and his Diorite friends, and then you have the Hillites, Jonathan Hill and his team of people. You have Augustine, what's his name? Brother Augustine or something. I think there's a fourth group now too. And that's not even counting the TOs. Like it's there. These guys are very far away from being.
They're a different communion altogether.
Yeah.
So
The issue is,
and you also have. Well, I'm talking about Chalcedonians, Dioscoros. I don't care if they're in communion or not. So you have the Papist side of things, the Roman Catholics, who like there's the traditional Catholics, the Byzantine Scotus guys. There's the Lofton modernist Novus Ordo people. They're all over the place, and nobody likes each other. They're all like certain like parties of whatever.
And
I mean,
and this is
the Byzantine Scotus guy. If he saw Yusuf Sladib's comment with the Hindi on it, he would have laughed at that one. That would have been funny.
Yeah, and the issue is even their theologians and scholars.
Oh crap! Thank you, Michael. Yeah, our server with Craig, and Jonathan Hill and Jay Dyer don't like that server. I'm in that server. Not to mention my own Lions Den server, guys. Please join. The invite out everybody. That's funny. That I didn't even know Craig. Poor Craig. Craig didn't do nothing to these guys. These guys are against Craig. Anyway,
Craig has been nothing but nice to everyone, and then he gets
exactly.
Now believe
Craig's nice to these people. What?
That's another big issue, though, is that a big reason why there's these splinter groups in the Melkite sort of communion and the mainstream one is that a lot of them are now believing that not the Diorites, but the other groups are starting to believe that every single church father has to have been infallible in everything they said.
Yeah, this is a problem.
Palamas says that, and Gregory of Sinai says that, and one of their Blackernay synods dogmatized literally everything Palamas said, such that they actually put an anathema on you if you disagree with anything Palamas said. So now Palamas is absolutely infallible, and he says everyone else is infallible.
Yeah, I don't know how EOs get away from that.
And
go ahead, I can. Go ahead.
I just want to say that their issue is each group is trying to follow a set of theologians and scholars of the modern day, but the issue is all these theologians and scholars disagree. For example, the other day I was trying to read up on Maximus of Constantinople, Maximus, a so-called confessor, And so I have two works on hand that I was reading off of. First off, Dr. Jordan Daniel Wood's paper that creation is incarnation in Maximus the Confessor. So he has in this paper, it's a dissertation on Maximus. And then another book called Union and Distinction in the Thought of Maximus the Confessor by Dr. Melchizedek Toronenon. These two books, if you read them, you're going to get completely different ideas. I would read one book and then go to the other one, and it would say the exact opposite. The exact opposite. It was insane. It was like making my mind want to explode. And so the group of who, such as what's his name, David Erhan and others who are in his faction, they, from what I've read, they follow along the lines of the views of Dr. Jordan Daniel Wood. Whereas I guess the Hillites, the people who follow Jonathan Hill, they follow more along the group of scholars such as Dr. Melchizedek Toronenon. And
Right.
so it's very, very contradictory. And you'll notice the same thing in Leontius of Jerusalem. And what's his name? David claims to get a lot of his Christology from Leontius. But the issue is, I mean, I've read Leontius of Jerusalem's book, and then I read a scholarly dissertation which was recommended by Erhan. Completely contradictory. I've never seen such big contradictions. There's no consistency. It's just everyone's saying
There's this weird thing with EOs and Nazis like recently. I think Mumkey might have started that. I don't know how that happened, but thank you.
Yeah, I might not be a good idea to
It's
talk
due
about.
to
Yeah, whatever. So there's another thing.
Also, I don't think it's ingrained into their tradition at all. Like, it's not canonized by any of them.
Okay.
It's usually best to stick to the canonized stuff.
Right. Yeah, I said Mumkey might have started it. I don't know.
Yeah.
Don't you
they
guys
have to rely on outside sources to be based, which we don't have to since our fathers are all based. So
yeah.
Don't you guys have contact with Jonathan Pego? He seems like a good guy. Yeah, he does seem like a good guy. And Jordan Peterson, but I don't have contact with any.
Yeah.
So if Catholics or EOs don't enter the true church, our church, through their baptism, why do we not baptize them when they enter our church and just chrismate them? I understand there's an agreement. No, it depends really on the bishop of the area. If the bishop in his economy chooses to recognize, as Father Shenouda Ishaq and Deacon Antonius put it, their credits, think of like a university accepting credits of another university or not. So if we, the true church, accept their credits in economia, then it's accepted. Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven. Whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. But if we don't choose to recognize their initiation, so we redo it.
And also the fact that we can choose, or like not we, but you know what I mean, our jurisdictions can choose to say, well, no, we're going to receive them by the holy baptism and not just the Mairun. That, and also the fact that reception by Mairun in itself, both of these point to the fact that those groups do not have the sacramental grace of the church.
Yeah, and I one example from the fathers that's often cited in the view that we shouldn't rebaptize anyone, and that their baptisms are inherently have grace, is a lot of people cite Saint Augustine, but I believe Craig, who we've brought up a couple of times now, he actually has found evidence from Saint Augustine that Saint Augustine denies that the sacraments outside the church have the Holy Spirit. So the sacraments outside the church, they are not truly sacraments. They lack the grace necessary. They have valid form, but they don't have the grace. And so when someone enters into the church, they receive the grace that they did not priorly have, even if the form is not redone by the economy of the church, which Daniel was talking about.
Okay. It seems like younger American converts are the most insufferable. Absolutely. And not to be racist, but that's because they're coming from the WASP tradition. And they're usually reformed, and they're kind of bringing the same mentality into variants of Eastern Christianity. Anyway, okay. Ingentis, what do y'all think about Craig's apologetic? I think Craig is a nice guy, and I consider him a friend of mine. Hi, Craig. If you're watching this, I appreciate your presence all the time. However, I strongly, he knows, I strongly disagree with his apologetic against us.
Here's the source, I think, of what someone needs to understand about the apologetics of the individual in question. There's a very good point that Mr. Shruglia brings up about the Roman Catholics, that the Roman Catholics decontextualize history, and that they rely on this in their apologetics, and he goes into great depth with this. Well, the unfortunate thing is the way that his apologetic against orthodoxy works with regards to the Christology is to decontextualize Christology, to say two natures after the union, one nature after the union. All two natures after the union means is dual consubstantiality. It literally doesn't indicate anything else except for dual consubstantiality. This is at least the idea being propagated. And so when we show the fact that the Holy Fathers of the Council of Ephesus anathematize two natures after the union in the most explicit and various ways, inside and outside of Ephesus, we are met with a massive decontextualization that I don't think we see even the Latins use with regards to theology, but now with Christology. And then when we go to the idea of, okay, who schismed from who, we hear about, the Saint Jacob Baradeus as if he instituted a parallel hierarchy. But again, this is itself a decontextualization of the history, which is that the schism started with Paul the Jew. Saint Jacob Baradeus was just continuing the legitimate Syriac Orthodox synod that was canonical, whereas the parallel one had already been well established as a parallel line for decades. And so this is a big problem, is to decontextualize on the front of history and on the front of Christology, and really alienating people, banning them from conversation because we have to resort to decontextualizations. This doesn't help out anyone's case.
Craig is being a faithful Chalcedonian. He's trying.
Yes.
He's trying to make it work. I admire you, Craig. You kind of have to go out on a limb. It's not your fault. Your tradition puts you there. So,
right. And that's, by the way, when we talk about the contradictions that this, Melkite group follows this belief and this one follows that belief, and they're all contradicting each other and anathematizing each other, the very reason they find that they're not stupid. They're actually, a lot of them are very smart. The reason that they find themselves in this position is because the self-same Melkite communion had dogmatized so many mutually contradicting positions that you kind of have to, when you want to believe your own denomination's theology, you have to pick one of the sides of what they have ingrained.
So where I'm going with this is, Craig, like we did a lot of shows together, you guys know. One of them on Chalcedon, he's trying to argue like the tome is Cyrillian, and they're trying intentionally to make it a Cyrillian council on purpose. And he said, we did another show on the letter of Ibas, and I think in both of those shows, Craig is trying really hard to do it, and it's just not what it is. It's not reality. No, the scholars don't agree with him. He's arguing from absence a lot of the time. He's trying to make it fit, and I admire him for that because he's loyal to the tradition that he chose to be a part of. Now, we have to wrap up because it's been almost 3 hours now. I'm going to try to get to these really fast because we still have questions. I don't want to leave anybody off
this question, I think the answer would take too long. It would be better if you asked it in the next video. But I'll give a brief
Let me just read it. Let me just read the question.
Sorry, my bad. Yeah, go ahead.
I always get stuff when people ask me about how Christ has one nature after the union. Then that means he is not of one nature with the Father and the Spirit. What is the answer to this? So really quick, like Ican said, we probably have to answer it in another video, but really quick, his one incarnate nature is still the same as the Father and the Holy Spirit, but we're talking about here something different in the incarnation, and that he's also consubstantial with us after the union. Okay.
So the incarnation deals with hypostases when you're talking about triadology. we're talking about the essence they share and not the particularity of every person in the Trinity. Because as we all know, only the second person of the Trinity incarnated. So the subject is much deeper than what we can do in one video. Like we're basically talking about universals when it comes to triology.
Here, I'll
Okay.
wait,
Yeah.
real
Oh,
quick.
Go ahead.
I'll in the next presentation, I'll prepare a special slide for your question, Nate J, if I remember, God willing. But just if you want to have a brief counter example against them, ask them, okay, how is Christ one being while also being one being with the Father? Because we affirm both. We affirm that he's one being even after the incarnation, but we also affirm he's one being with the Father. So that's a good question to ask the Chalcedonians. Their only two solutions are either to say their question is wrong, their question they shouldn't ask that question because it has a false premise, or they would have to admit that either Jesus and the Father are two beings, or admit that Christ is two beings, which is Nestorianism.
Okay, thank you guys. Next episode, when it's to be uploaded, whenever anybody we figure it out together, I'm open. These guys have my schedule to know whenever they want the next episode of the metaphysics thing to be uploaded. Let me know. I can. Okay. And then let's see. Thomas Polycarp never claimed to be a student of John the Apostle. Irenaeus, his student, did. How do you respond? So what? It's still true. Let's see here.
I mean, I don't claim to be the son of my mother. It doesn't mean it's not true.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't see me walking around saying, "Hey, man, did you know I'm the son of my mother?" Oh, you didn't know? Oh, my bad.
Okay, guys. Thank you for everything. Thank you, Ican, Dionysios, Dioscoros. Thank you. The prayers of Saints Dionysios and Dioscoros of Alexandria, and the prayers of Saint Peter, Saint Mark, Saint Ignatius, Saint Ephraim, and Saint Daniel be with us. And pray for us, guys. Like, subscribe, comment, and we'll see you next time. Okay?
Thank you guys for watching, and thank you, Daniel, for hosting us.
Sure.
Thank you so much, and thanks for playing with my lateness.
Thank you, guys. Bye.